Welcome to your Wednesday night, everybody. It's good to be back after a nice break for the 4th of July. And I guess it was the third last Wednesday, but yeah, it's been an awesome summer over here at Casa Garton, and a lot of big things happen in our life, as you know, from all the pregnancy related content. But today, it occurs to me that this topic does apply to the concept of parenting, which is, of course, on my mind, but verbal judo. You may have heard this phrase. It's trained to the police cadets, corpo babies, students and the like have received this training over the years. It's been, kind of a best kept secret or secret in plain sight of tactical communications, whether for preserving the peace or for making a big sale. And the interesting thing about the subject is Gabe and I have been kicking it around to do a Vibrant on it for 5 or 6 weeks, something like that. And it was all inspired by Gabe stumbling upon some old videos that from the man himself who created this verbal judo concept. And Gabe brings it to One-on-One podcast. And then next thing you know, it's been scrubbed from the internet. So as usual, our man's got his finger on the pulse. I'm excited to get down with the slickness, as Kabir said in the chat here. It's really fun to have a one-on-one with my main man here, and it's going to be a great time for you guys in the chat too. Good to see everyone who's here. Mai Cherie, Yvette, Justness, Jenny G, Tactical Will. That's a great screen name. Let us know who's here. Sound off in the chat. This is going to be an interesting one, man. We're looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly, or the social engineering, I should say, of verbal judo. Is it something to put into practice? Are there concepts here that's good for you in your relationships? Is this something that could cause harm more than help? We're going to dissect all of it. Gabe, welcome to Vibrant, man. It's good to be hanging.
Thank you so much, brother. Yes, this project has been cooking for a long time. I'm so excited. Big up Peter Shell, much respect. Yeah, I'm very excited to share this one. And you're so right. You nailed it. That it is the perfect initiation for a father. Verbal judo is very great uh, mentality to absorb as you're about to go on the greatest adventure there is. And you want to stay at the helm. You want to be the man at the wheel at all times. So yeah, I'm just glad that this is coming right in stride with your next rite of passage. This is glorious.
Cool, man. I feel the same way. As I went through the material, found that I already had a lot of these techniques naturally developed. I think there's some things that you can just figure out, or maybe this is Libra moon, which I am, just automatically diplomatic and emotionally charged situations. Who knows? But do you want to introduce anything about the concept on the more esoteric end, or maybe talk about your experience of being probed by the big machine and where you have your target on being the rug pulled out from under you and all that?
Yes. Essentially, something I've been picking up on as I study the philosophers of old is I'm realizing that they metaphorically they resort to martial combat uh, uh, almost habitually because it is the best medium for seeing eye to eye, for creating a theoretical space where your ideas can actually uh, battle in a gladiatory arena of possibilities inside of your head. And then the greatest of the concepts is the one that you will uh, act upon. But if plan A falls apart and that was not the best one, you just go back to the arena and you resurrect plan B and launch that onto the world. Um, and this is a hallmark of great minds. And I'll just lay out some of my discoveries around studying Socrates and the many different Socrates. There's not just one. A lot of people think of him strictly through the Plato's lens, but I've actually gone on to find Xenophon's derivative of Socrates, and I find him incredibly superior to the Plato's Socrates. Um, but something that my love for this fictional character, Socrates, my love for Socrates has been rewarded knowing that his skill sets are actually martial. Before he became philosophic, he was a skilled swordsman. He was one of the best swordsmen in Athens at the time. But also, the fact that the first academy ever, the academia, was built on the foundations of the gymnasium, and that the actual first location there, it's a sacred spot where they established the first gymnasium where men could go to fight and toil and gain the upper hand and establish their superiority, much like we still do when we have a plan A or a plan B, or my idea versus your idea. And we bring the ideas together and we let them tussle out a little bit. And then the end result is a betterment for everybody. So that's just a fascinating truth that all of academy is built upon the foundation of struggle. And there are certain religious orders still running who they have a nickname for themselves. They would call themselves those who struggle with God, those who wrestle with God. And that little uh, fact, uh, it pops up in other places where you wouldn't expect it. Another example, Schopenhauer, he has a, I recommend this, he has what's called the 38 bad faith arguments. He literally goes through 38 different techniques of how to fight dirty in debate, if you're in a debate. But he's always using a setting of either like you're in a, if you are a lawyer, if you're in the courtroom, but he also you parallels the courtroom with sword fighting. And we happen to know that the word court means to cut. And so I also have studied some of the schools of sword fighting. There's a secret society called the Minciers, which is hard to pronounce, let alone spell, but it's an old German sect of sword fighters who had a very strict etiquette on how to conduct yourself behind the blade. And it's fascinating, all of the things that the Minciers implemented into the rules of engagement. And some of those rules of engagement from the sword fighting schools, I can see them laid out in the verbal judo. And so a lot of people like to think of verbal conflict as separate from, or um, even removed from physical confrontation. But the general parameters of the modality of how you conduct yourself is all the same. It's all the same arena. So with all of that in mind, I was reflecting back on my own, I don't even remember, maybe 10 years ago, I read Verbal Judo, and I don't think I really finished it. Um, so I decided I was going to dust it off again and get a refresher on it. And I ended up finding his firsthand seminar from when his name is Dr. George the Rhino Thompson. And that name, the Rhino, jumped out at me because I didn't know that was part of his personality back when I read Verbal Judo the first time. That was news to me that his nickname is the Rhino. I oh, thank you. So I went ahead and I watched his seminar from when he was much younger. I don't know what year it was, but he was definitely much younger. Turns out he passed in 2011, which is going to be a significant is very significant. But so I watched his seminar firsthand, seeing the man in action. And I realized I had been missing a great amount of context for what they've done to take this living personality who has disseminated his philosophy onto the police. And and I believe that they have captured his essence and put it into cultural icons. I would say that if anybody remembers Sergeant Slaughter from GI Joe and or the WWF, the wrestling character, I would say that he is very parallel to the essence of Sergeant Slaughter. But I think I've taken it to the next level at this point in my life. Now that I have this Enneagram system and its cultural implications on the synchromythic dimensions, I think I've found him literally embedded into the essence of one of these tarot cards, and in fact, the entire cartoon industry is recently popped up on my radar. So I'm literally looking at the psychological components of what has made cartoons since our childhood. And sure enough, this guy is living large and well in the Crowley adjustment card. Um, but this is a claim. I'm making a difficult claim because the receipts have already been burned behind me. You know, the fact that they scrubbed the exact videos that I was watching from the internet is very frustrating, but I think we can still build this bridge quite handedly. Um, but when I was watching his videos, I was very excited about my discoveries. And so I began to clip key elements out of his video and post them over on my Telegram channel. And just to kind of prepare people's minds for what I was going to uh, reveal from what I had learned. And sadly enough, I was very schizophrenic in my demystifying of the magic that he was using in his seminar. When I clipped those videos, I gave them titles that were uh, uh, probably triggering some of the heads that oversee things, and they washed it all out. They washed it out. We can't find it now, but that's okay because I got screen caps, and I've got a lot of the good evidence that we can build this case back up. Um, and George the Rhino Thompson, uh, it was I keep referring to him as a evil slick dissident because he has a dry erase board and he's training the police to self-abandon, to self-evacuate, and to remove all essence of self-interest and to become a machine. And I found this fascinating because I think I had a false formula. I had a false formula that the costume that the officer puts on, I used to believe that that was the persona, that that was the mask, that that's the state issued ID that they go on to go as an actor on the stage. But I think I'm realizing there's another level beyond what we call personhood. There's a level of self abandonment beyond what we call fulfilling the person. And uh, Um, and I don't know if we don't really have a name for it, but I'm just realizing that even the police who are being instructed to even abandon the mask that they identify with and to associate with something even more mechanical and nefarious and removed from the human experience. And so that's really what kind of fascinated me is that I assumed that the cop's uniform was a personage, but I'm realizing that my formula was off. There's something beyond trying to be a better person, and that is a level of slavery and servitude that is just uh, frightening. It's really frightening. And so I'll just pull up the justice card or the adjustment card.
Let me just get
And some of
a
my
clean image
discoveries
of it and I'll screen
around
share
this,
that.
there we go. Some of my discoveries around that card um, are like an entire hallway down the Library of Alexandria of contexts. I'm seeing my stations of the Enneagram as hallways in the Library of Alexandria. And this hallway that connects to the adjustment card has a patron saint. This is how I see it. And the patron saint of the adjustment card is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Friedrich Nietzsche gave him a nickname. He had a whole ton of nicknames for the philosophers that came before him. But Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Nietzsche would call him the moral tarantula. And the reasoning for why he would accuse Jean-Jacques Rousseau of being a moral tarantula is that he's feeling oriented. He's too heart centered. He believes in a he has like a utopian ideal of anarchy. He has too much of an anarchist spirit, and Nietzsche sees that as actually irresponsible and dangerous. But Jean-Jacques Rousseau has an opening line to one of his main bodies of work, and that opening line is, "Man is born free, and yet everywhere he would go, he is in chains. Yet those who presume to control others are, in fact, more of a slave themselves than anybody they would control." And so that line, that opening line, it caused a tidal wave in the philosophic circles in its time. And he put it in the first line of the book. So it's an initiation, like we like to do when we're watching film. We know that the opening scene is setting the stage and will also be returned to at the end of the film. You should always consider the opening and the closing as alpha omega. There's an alpha and omega on the scales right here. So this card embodies Jean-Jacques Rousseau in a vast and profound way from history, going backwards from where the tarot cards were made. And a lot of people, like Juan, had asked me, he's like, "Oh, how do these cards have so much meaning?" And what I think is a great answer is that Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the history of moral tarantulas were embedded into the card when it was made, and that gives it 100,000 words that you could speak on about it. However, the card has also been unpacked since the making of the deck. And so there's added context uh, even since the making of the image. And so it was informed by 100,000 words before it was put out on the public. And then the mad magicians at large have packed even more meaning onto it ever since then. And so that is a fascinating amount of things to consider, all packed into this image right here. Um, so Jean-Jacques Rousseau as the moral tarantula, he becomes a bit of a patriarch for communism. It is required reading, but a lot of folks would tell you that when the social justice warriors, that's your word right there. You hear the word social justice warriors, you should be thinking about moral tarantulas. You should be thinking about what Nietzsche said about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And so when the social justice warriors start shaking the web of connectivity, Slick Dissident has a real sense for what direction to look to find their signs and their symbols at play. Um, so that card has, if you look very closely, actually, if you pull it up from the Telegram chance, it's the graphic that has um, Rachel Maddow at the bottom. Rachel Maddow is a moral tarantula of the highest order. Thank you. Yes. So I believe that Rachel Maddow was disclosed or unleashed on our young, supple minds in the Ghostbusters film. And I am quite convinced that Gozer the Gozerian was very much foreshadowing the career of this Rhodes Scholar, who is very capable of causing the social justice warriors to get to get all caught up in a tizzy. So I see her as a bit of a master Black Widow spider pulling strings behind the scene. So I just wanted to include her in the moral tarantula. But can you see, Chance, how the eyeballs of the tarantula correspond with the orbs on the card? the descending spheres from the above corners?
I can, and it's the eighth card, which is the arachnid signature, 8 legs. I think they have as many eyes.
Yes, yes. And so as I started to watch George the Rhino Thompson uh, animate in person, it was totally different from knowing him as an author. Uh, and it was really it was breaking the spell. It was breaking the spell to actually see him as a person trying to conduct and instill the lessons from the book onto police officers to go forward like soulless robots and destroy lives with no thought, with with no thought at all. Everything is automatic for them. And so this is like I said, this is beyond the person. This is a programming with even less margin for consideration, what the police are being put through. And as I watch him on the stage, he's like Sergeant Slaughter. He's like moving around. He's doing crazy kung fu moves, and he's like literally doing like power moves up there. But he makes a few in his presentation. He makes a few very revealing statements. He says that a lot of people are verbal karate fighters, karate artists, and you don't want to use karate. We're using jujitsu here. And when he said that, it was such a great metaphor. I knew exactly what he meant. It made perfect sense. And again, remember, the great philosophers don't just sit around and think. Socrates wasn't just a sit around and think kind of guy. He was go out and do. He was living the vision. And so, um, my immediate uh, kind of counter thought was, well, jujitsu has a weak spot, and that is ninjutsu. It is the ninjutsu. The ninjutsu technique has been designed to undermine and circumvent jujitsu. And so, one of the facts of that is jujitsu requires proximity. It requires proximity. It requires manhandling. It's dependent
The
on
principle is you
actual
must stay in contact. Staying in contact. Sorry to talk over you.
Yes,
We have
and
that little bit of lag. I I want to hold that thought because this metaphor of different fighting styles will come up. I have just a few slides that will prompt us to kind of take this in an order and a progression that will be hopefully the most benefit to everybody, to extract the gems, to refute the poison pills, and to see the bigger picture of how these type of tactics are used in a manipulative way on a large scale, but more importantly, how they represent the internal conflict of the human being. So it's a lot of ambition for this conversation. Jenny's right. We missed Slick on Wednesdays a lot. That was an amazing monologue there. And there's a few things to respond to that I can remember. I'm sure I thought of more as we were going, but the first thing is this notion of the martial artist and the philosopher, or that the best rhetoricians themselves have some sort of martial skill. It is an old concept, and I think it bears mentioning before the mythological imperialism of what we call the ancient Greeks. There was a notion of this god that later became known as Hercules, but that he and the mercurial characteristic of eloquence and manipulative or tricky speech, that was actually the main characteristic of this Hercules, the Irish ogmios, they called it. So you can see in this image, it's a little, grainy or whatever. It's a sketch, but ogmios was depicted. You can see the club. That's the club of Hercules. And he's got that sort of hairy wild man thing going on. But there are these chains, and in some artwork, they're golden chains. They go from his lips to the ears of his followers. So this is conquest through speech, through eloquence, which is what verbal judo really is about. And as far as the layers of the layers of personhood. That is an interesting concept too. So I want to circle back to that, that the police officers were in person themselves and then trying to get the defendant to act in person. And hopefully this audience is kind of beyond the entry level knowledge of the black magic, legal sorcery questions. But let's talk about George a little more. George, Doc Rhino, Thompson. So, and before I progress, everyone who's here, stoked to see you here. If you guys wanted to do us a solid, if you have the time, and of course the like, subscribe, that's all good. But the share part, if there's a cool place or person to share this information with that would like the schizophrenic perspective as well as the communication tactics, then please do. We could use it. I mean, I'm not complaining. Everything's fair and fine. But if Gabe is causing videos that were on YouTube from the beginning of YouTube, probably, they're old as hell, to be removed by going on a large podcast and talking about the subject matter, somebody out there's got it out for him. And, by that matter, those associated with them. It's not a victim perspective. It's just funny. So you guys are our best promoters, right? Now, George the Rhino Thompson was a college professor of English at Princeton, of all places. I don't know if he taught at Princeton, but he had his PhD from Princeton. So we're in the Ivy League. This is the big boys. This is not like just some entry-level schmuck, your garden variety English teacher. This guy got the top-tier training. And as someone who was an English major, I second his realization that you don't really get taught communication as an English major. And that was his big fascination as somebody that had speech problems early in life, stuttering and all that. And as as the nickname the Rhino would suggest, a bit aggressive and tend to be overbearing, which will cause a lot of problems, hurting yourself with that type of behavior. So George, as a 35-year-old professor of English, left his job and joined the police force because in his perspective, the police were the most effective communicators and he wanted to learn from them what worked so well. And in the course of his time there, this is all, the cover story, if you will. In the course of his time there, he became so adept at helping other people in the department see the best way to diffuse the conflict situations with words that sort of just became his job, teaching what he eventually started to call verbal judo. Now there's a Verbal Judo Institute. Maybe they're the ones that took down the old videos. The whole YouTube account was deleted. I haven't had the level of FOMO that I got about those videos getting taken down for a long time because I had been saving it. Like me and Gabe were planning this conversation for weeks, and I thought I'm just going to watch those, the week before, the day before, and then it's all going to be fresh. I'm saving it. Don't make that mistake, people. The internet is not the living, breathing, eternal entity that you might kind of see it as. If there's something that interests you or that you find to be like rare and helpful information, save it offline, especially if I'm coming back to this later and it's of a more occult nature. You probably need to just save it offline. Take the extra time, take the extra step. I learned my lesson. So if anybody out there happened to preserve the Rhino Thompson videos that Gabe was talking about, because he's been on it for a little while, let us have it. We would like that. But I have some clips of George talking, and it's the only seminar that's still around. It's him talking to some more like, corpo babies in training, not necessarily geared towards police cadets like what Gabe found from the 90s or however far back before PowerPoint. He was on this whiteboard, the evil Slick Dissident. But some of this is still useful. So I'm going to just play the first clip here. Intro to George.
I've been teaching this for 26 years. I was an English professor for 10, taught Shakespeare and Milton, that kind of thing. Then I became a policeman, and I did that for 6 years full-time and another 20 or so part-time. I got cancer 3 years ago. No, 203. 6 years ago. Of the vocal cord, so that's why I sound like the Godfather. They took the vocal cord out, the left one that was affected, and they had to pull the right one over so I can talk. Which means if I sound like Darth Vader the way I breathe, it's because I have about, where you have this much breathing, I've got like that. So just walking upstairs is an effort.
Okay, so this is him near the end of his career, and he did not live a very long life. As people out there hip to the biofield anatomy, it has to strike as a sad irony that this guy, being a teacher of speech, winds up with cancer of the vocal cords. That is not a coincidence. That has to do with the core philosophy that he teaches and espouses, which is, and I quote exact words, train yourself to do the opposite of what you feel or want. That is the self-abandonment Gabe is talking about. That is the foundation of the whole verbal judo system, at least for the law enforcement side. And, think about like RFK Jr. in this context. Seems like, from the first examination, a good guy, speaking truth to power, yada, yada. Of course, he's as mafia as any other Kennedy, right? And you know that with just a cursory examination. You got 2 wives suicided. Where there's smoke, there's fire. It's all very ugly. And as Owen Benjamin says, the man sounds like a frog sitting on a washing machine getting a blowjob, which is, that's about as accurate a summary of his voice as I can imagine. So I point this out because as we're going through this information, and I'll remind everyone again at the end, this is not an endorsement of these tactics. There may be aspects of these tactics that can be integrated in a helpful or healthy way. So I'm not saying throw all the baby out with the bathwater, but the throat disease danger, I think, comes into the play with the manipulative aspect of this verbal judo, that there's things that you can do with this, like conflict de-escalation, where putting yourself aside and maybe even accepting a little ethical gray area or dishonesty that serves a greater good. In a situational case, I'm not going to say that you did the wrong thing if it saves a life or if it stops someone from getting hurt. I'm not. But at the traffic stop or in the courtroom or all the other ways that a police officer will get, this whole thing is about training people to self-incriminate, to comply, voluntary compliance with things that might not be for their best interest. And so to me, that's where the throat disease is coming in for a guy like this. He could have used this information just for the good, even as a police officer. I mean, when you hear some of the stories that he tells about conflicts that were de-escalated with these techniques, if you just read the book and you didn't see the stuff that Gabe saw and got taken off the internet, you'd think, give this guy a trophy. This guy's a hero. This guy's saving lives. And I'm not taking away any of the good that this stuff has provided to the world. We're going to have police officers. We want them to be able to de-escalate. But how many of them, since this guy's no longer teaching the art as openly as he was, even realize the type of sorcery they're involved in? Apparently, he was very upfront about teaching them that the legal name, the corporate fiction, was sorcery, was black magic, in those exact words. So,
yeah, buddy,
training yourself to do the opposite of what you feel or what you want, that is not healthy for your biofield energy. And especially if there's major cognitive dissonance that's following out of that, you're going to wind up with some sort of dysfunction, injury, disease, problem. That's just the way it is. So do not take this stuff in lightly. Don't practice it just for personal power or gain. But, in the right situation with the right intention, and maybe even the suppressing of your feelings or your wants, but with an outlet to express them later when the bomb is diffused. Sure. But again, none of this is an endorsement. You got to use your own judgment about how to utilize these type of conversational techniques. And I want to just get a little further in here before I kick it back to you, Gabe, because we might, you might have a lot to say, and that's great. The bottom line of verbal judo is you're telling the other basically say whatever you want, but you do what I say. You say what you want, but do what I say. It's the good cop, bad cop rolled into one character. It's really amazing. So the point about this on a bigger picture scale is that the system, the government, the social engineers, whatever you want to call it, they see the public as a threat, the same way that the cops see a crackhead on the street with a gun as a threat. And we're going to learn throughout this presentation about how judo as a system, judo means it works via the deflection of confrontation, which is exactly what the state and social engineers have to keep at the forefront of all of their designs, because confrontation with the populace is always going to be a loss for them in resources and PR. And you'll notice that they've gotten really good at this. At least in the Western nations, when was the last time, I guess there was some, big monkey business in France in recent years in terms of people taken to the street and all that. But it's all of the places where there's big unrest movements are controlled opposition. It's January 6th. That's, George Floyd riots. It's all the like, where you give the baby a crib to cry and scream, but they can't get out of the bars of that crib. They're not going to actually do any harm. You led them there yourself. It's about the self-incrimination. They create the circumstances for self-incrimination. And that's on the big picture scale. And then the little picture scale is the way police use this. So say what you want, do as I say. That's the key downside of free speech. They're always reminding you, say whatever you want. You can say whatever you want as long as you do what we say. And that's the purpose of all of the outlets for griping and complaining that we have online. The truther movement, where no change really ever occurs. The beginning of the book, in fact, I don't know if you remember this, Gabe, but he invokes the Rodney King incident and he says that the cops that were involved in that publicity stunt were 1 week away from taking the verbal judo course. Oh, only they had verbal judo. But in my opinion, he's wrong about that because I think that was going to be a mass media event, locked and loaded in some way, shape, or form, regardless. The last thing I'll say before I kick it over is, it's just like the quote from JP Morgan or whoever about billionaires using astrology, if that's who said it. John D. Rockefeller says, in order to achieve the pinnacle of success in life, we must first master communications. I have yet to meet a man who needed no one to achieve greatness. And that's really the bottom line here, is these artificial systems, these corporations, whether they be one man with a net worth of billions or trillions, or a country that's also a corporation that's also a person. The point is, for things to be structured outside of what would naturally be possible, for conceptual ideas like a group to actually hold some sort of power or some sort of influence into the collective, despite the fact that it does not exist in nature and it's just a mental concept, all of that requires incredible groundwork of communication to even seed the idea, to even make that seem possible, where this nebulous fictional authority now is actually somehow a voice in your head, a superego that gives you a constant view of yourself from the outside saying, what does it look like when I do this? Or am I allowed to do that? Rather than just checking in with your inner voice and saying, is this right or wrong? Which we always had and always should have. Okay, back to you.
Yeah, buddy. Nice. Yeah, I completely want to reinforce what you said about I am still conflicted within as to how to handle the taking down of a hero, somebody that I admired and learned from and have incorporated, but doing so in a way that's respectful, and that serves to benefit everybody else all the more for that removing of an icon from some high throne of authority. So I'm totally with you that it's like take what's good and leave the rest. And I am constantly telling myself not to get my feels involved because my heart is broken when I see this man. It is broken for him. My heart is broken for him. And the things that I'm going to postulate as to what was done, harnessing his body's work and the way, oh, oh,
Yeah, you're getting
am I
zapped a
good?
little bit. I think you're back.
Is that me? Okay.
Super zapped. Okay.
It looks a little glitchy right now.
Well, I'm going to press forward, Gabe, and we
Hope
might.
you're there.
Yeah,
It
you
looks like
hang
the
tight.
signal's zapped.
You're going to be back in action any second, and I'll just cover another slide and a clip, and that'll let you catch up and all that. So first, and this is so huge. This is a huge reveal. This clip's about a minute and a half. So here we go.
So write this down. Natural language is disastrous.
Okay. Yeah.
And unless you're trained in tactical language, you use it all the time. Natural language is disastrous, which suggests there's a need for the opposite, which is tactical language. Now I'm going to define it for you. Tactical language are words shaped to achieve the goal in front of you. I never express my feelings on the job unless they're positive. I perform speech. You say what you have to say to get the job done. A good mark that you're using the wrong language, if it makes you feel good, you probably ought not to say it. Right? I have a law. If it makes you feel good, it's no good. Don't say it. Okay? Tactical language is a performing language. You'll notice the chameleon is up on my sheet there. Why would I choose a chameleon to be one of my two mascots for a course in verbal judo? What do we know about chameleons? They change color according to the environment. Mastery through adaptation is an ancient samurai warfare, and it's also a communication principle. You become who you have to handle the scene in front of you. Okay, that's the essence of this stuff.
Yeah, and just hearing the Darth Vader breathing, I hear where you're coming from about it being kind of heartbreaking. Let's cover off this natural language thing, because that is the biggest reveal maybe in the whole watered down corporate version of his teaching that is still available out there. Natural language. Well, before we get into natural language, let's just talk about verbal judo versus verbal karate. This is a big tenet of his work. Verbal karate is where you lash out or snap at anyone using what he calls natural language evoked by your emotions. In other words, when your words are used as blows, when there's any intent at all in your words to make the other feel bad, that is verbal karate. And I would agree that this is a no-no. It escalates things. It ruins your credibility or authority, particularly in romantic relationships. You know, George is fond of saying that words are not the same as the wounds caused by weapons or physical violence. That stuff heals, but when you say something, you can't take it back. Even if you apologize, even if you say I didn't mean it. Later down the road, you ask somebody if they remember what harsh words were said to them, they probably do. You know, that it never really goes away the way that a cut or a bruise actually goes away. So verbal karate, no. You can never undo it, especially to a loved one, if you say something horrible to them. So I agree that in terms of if it feels good, it's no good. Well, if it feels good in that sort of vindictive, righteous indignation, I'm slam dunking on them, it's going to hurt them because they know it's true type of thing. Yeah, that is no good. And I don't think that it harms your throat chakra energy to withhold yourself from making statements like that. If you find yourself constantly wanting to bring things up like that, you have a whole nother problem going on, which is you're probably in some kind of victimized empath versus energy vampire narrative in your life. And that's a whole different set of circumstances to resolve. And then, you know, so you've got to change whatever is causing you to want to do that. But the point being with verbal karate, you're not performing. What does it mean to perform? Performance is the opposite of what is easy and natural, right? In legal speak, performance is the fulfillment of one's obligations required by contract. Specific performance of a contract may be demanded in a lawsuit. Partial performance is short of full performance spelled out in the contract, but if the contract provided for a series of acts or deliveries with payment for each of the series, there may be partial recovery for what has been performed or delivered, even if there is not full performance. So my point with giving you the legal textbook definition of performance is that you are actually breaking your social contracts with others when you engage in verbal karate. And in the context of being the police officer, you're always performing. You're always performing the fulfillment of your obligation in the contract. So the other thing about this with the natural language is disastrous, that is a huge reveal, is that natural language doesn't just mean what George means, that it's the things that sort of bubble up in you in an emotional sense and are easy to blurt out and rise to the surface without thought. Natural language is all language that we speak. It is the shifting of meanings and definitions and pronunciations that occurs gradually over time through a society and through groups and through individuals. That's natural language. The opposite of natural language is dead language, like Popish Latin or legalese. Languages that are contract bound, that are copyright owned, that have specific legal definitions that are unchangeable, and you can't make a claim that I meant this by that word. In the dead language, in the contract language, in the legalese, it means what it means. Even if you're ignorant of what it means, that is not a defense. You find that out real quick in a courtroom, I'm sure. Luckily, never had to be in that situation. So, you know, this is a good time to kick it back over to you, Gabe, and then particularly to maybe get back into how the old videos that got nuked off of YouTube, George quite specifically refers to naming a person or getting them to give their name as black magic to control. Whoever names controls. And the legal name, if nothing else, the legal name, your corporate identity, invokes the whole concept of performance, because your citizenship is a contract to perform. That it is, legally speaking. That's not made up concept. That's really what it is.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah. You know, on the I will totally end in the black magic aspect. The difference between karate and judo, for the athletes in the crowd, think of baseball, going up to bat at baseball, in the way that you step into the twist of the hips to hit the ball. That coming at the ball forward is very much like karate, much like natural speak. Judo is much more like a samurai drawing his sword, which does not necessarily step forward. I'm going to actually try to execute. So the sword draw doesn't come forward by nature. It actually involves stepping back. And the difference between a baseball swing and a samurai draw is the difference between karate and judo. And so for the athletes in the crowd, I just wanted to demonstrate a physical example of the difference between karate and judo. That stepping back and still having all the energy you need is just a fine nuance to the difference in the art. And then, like I said, Ninjas have a whole nother idea in mind. They've already played these possibilities out. So, and then one more point: Socrates, my personal psychopomp, is the master of drawing out your daemon. And I believe that Socrates, this is a profound statement, and we are not going to substantiate it here. I believe that Socrates is deep coded for the Grand Inquisition. And when the Inquisition needs to roll out and find the demonic spirit of derelict souls, they will resort to the techne that Socrates is preserving. And so when which I do not plan, but if I'm ever in the presence of a police officer, the officer and I will be playing the game. Who is the better Grand Inquisitor here? Which one of us is the one who gets answers, and which one of us is the answering? Because Socrates is the ass king. He remains as king. And if you can remain as king, then the person in your presence owes you the inswears. And so this is techne from the Inquisition, and that's dark. That's a dark psychopomp to hold on to, especially in the heat of the battle. So remaining as king is sovereignty. And now,
Yeah.
digging
And we'll,
into his...
we'll return to that idea because it's a very important part of all this in terms of the power dynamics. And so that's not the last thing to say about it, but I'm glad that you brought that up.
Thank you. Yes. So some of my talking points, I got a short list here that I just wanted to make sure I don't miss out on as just evidence from his presentation in his seminar. One of the things you will notice about him in his earlier days, if you can ever find it, was he was a tactical sniffer. And he would use sniffing as an NLP anchor to drive his messaging into his students. Also, a detail that is hard to actually pull out of his written bios, it's actually from his own words in the seminar. His focus at Princeton was mastering and disseminating the Ars Notoria magical grimoire. This magical grimoire, you can look into it, and it also has close relatives. But these are the Master Magi's foundational books. Yes, a lot of tactical sniffing out there, and that could be a show in itself. I think it serves two purposes. One is maybe three purposes. One is NLP. Two is he wants to convey to his victims that he can sense what they have to hide. He wants you to have a feeling that he has this super sensory perception and he can see through you with his nose. So he's constantly sniffing intentionally. It's almost like he's putting the sniff on the record. It's almost as though he knows there's some recording and he wants it to establish that he is smelling the situation. But then the third reason is I think he was probably high on some coke. And when we get into his fictional persona, it plays in a really nefarious way. This implication of methamphetamines as the secret to his success. So there is a lot to his tactical sniffing that I found really tasteless and hard to stomach, but it is what it is. And I think maybe a lot of folks have been pulled over and got the big sniff. And it's just interesting that we're looking at the daemon, the grand daemon of tactical sniffing in the police circles. And then another thing that is important is he says in his own words that the first word that the police officer says to you is breaking in. He says it in his own words in the presentation. The first sentence you say is breaking in. And this is his technique for steamrolling all of your first four amendments are taken away in his first paragraph. He has boiled down the essence of your amendments, and he's aiming for your fifth. His goal is to get you to give away that Fifth Amendment, but he's already stripped off your first four amendments with his introduction line. And he brags about it. He's so proud. It's so amazing how proud he is. He's like, yeah, you give me 40 seconds and I've already gotten through your first two of the fourth phases of engagement. That's what they call it. They call it other things. They don't call it stripping away your amendments. That is not the words they use, but that is the ends that it serves. And then it's on the fourth step after his fourth step is the first time he actually gives you a chance to speak. And everything you say at the fourth phase of engagement is volunteering and giving up your right to not self-incriminate. Your 5 First Amendments are all you need. That's all you need with the cops. And if they get that fifth one taken away from you, you're in their arena. You're in their world of fiction, and they can do with you all kinds of wild things. So yes, it is constantly important that you are not saying anything that is not reinforcing the 5. And it is the number 5 for a reason. This is Neo when he stops the bullets and he says the N word. He stops those bullets and he's using the 5 to stop the bullets. And these are your first Fifth Amendments. You shouldn't need to go beyond that. You can walk them in circles all day long, just sticking to your 5. It's even more simple for us than it is for them. And another thing you have on your side is time. You're not getting paid to do this. You're not privileged by money to stand here and talk. You're not getting privileged by money. They are executing privilege because they're getting paid to jack your life. So you just run that clock. Just run that clock and go through the 5 amendments and don't say anything but the 5 amendments. You read the amendments to them if you need to burn the clock. I have a lot of really fun advice on how to walk the Bagua Xin Yi circle with the police officers. I have a lot of fun advice. So I just wanted to expose that in his own words, he reveals that the first sentence is breaking and entering into your sanctimount sense of what the 5 amendments have given us. And then
The sword of insertion,
he
calls
uses
it.
Bingo. So then he says, in his own words, it was such a useful metaphor. I'm glad he said it. But the sentence is, remember, he's Ars Notoria. He's mastered this book of rapid magic learning. And he says in his own words, if you want to control your enemy, then you must use the black magic of controlling them by their name. For example, if your child has a teddy bear and has given the teddy bear a name, and you take that teddy bear and throw it out the window on the family vacation, then you just threw out a member of the family. I could not believe how accurate that is, but think of what it means for the placenta. Think of what the teddy bear with the name means for the placenta. Volunteering when your mother informs on you that teddy bear that is the placenta is getting thrown out the window, and yeah, it's very fascinating what that means. But the thing that gets me is I have great reason to believe that the social engineers have taken Dr. Rhino and made him into a toy for children and then sold it to the kids in the context of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so this childhood toy that is attached to at a supple young age is actually come back in the window and landed in your child's lap. And its name is Dr. Rhino, which is Rocksteady from Rocksteady and Bebop from the Ninja Turtles. And so while he's telling you don't throw out a toy that your child loves, because that would be black magic, and meanwhile, they're taking his essence and putting him into a toy and putting it in the child's lap for them to associate with. And I wouldn't see this as nearly as nefarious if they had put him into a toy that was actually a hero or a protagonist, but they put him into an antagonist, a spirit of a police officer embedded into a bully or a nemesis. Bebop and Rocksteady were the bad guys, uh, and then put back onto the children, such that hip hop and police officers and bullies, all in one foul swoop, are associated with this controller with the shadow of domineering, totally a number 8 personality type on the Enneagram. Um, and then another thing that he does is he creates a mantra for all of the police officers. He says in his own words, if I could have it my way, we would have this phrase painted over the hallway of the locker rooms and all the police stations, and all would have it in the dashboard of the police officers, so they could say this mantra to flip a switch in their mind. And that mantra was, showtime, baby. It's showtime. And when you say it's showtime to yourself, this is his instructions, then you lose your person. You lose the person. You become a machine. And there's nothing to sympathize with anymore. There's no chance of sympathizing. Their humanity is switched off. And back in his days, the word Showtime was a household name. Showtime was one of the great channels that all the fun stuff was Showtime, HBO. But then also in the Ninja Turtles, Bebop and Rocksteady, I think it was in the video games, and I bet it's in the comics as well. But that was one of their introductory lines, as they would come together to fight the turtles, and they would say, "Showtime, baby!" And then the ninjas would fight with Bebop and Rocksteady. And so it's fascinating how we don't have receipts, but once you make this case, it becomes hard not to believe. It becomes very hard not to believe that the Rhino was instilled into a nemesis for the children.
And we did have receipts, but then they were removed from all vestiges of existence on the internet. As it was something we were talking about and percolating about. That can't get over that. Let's see. You covered so many points, man. I'm trying to go back in time to some of the thoughts I had to respond to, and I don't know. They'll come back as necessary. I'll just press forward with the next slide, and before that slide requires us to go ahead and watch another clip of old George the Rhino. So we're going to be talking about the judo aspect of this. Here we go. This is not even a minute.
Judo is based on using other people's energy, not your own. Secondly, like all martial arts, judo is based on redirection, which is what you do when you deal with angry people. You want to use this principle, the triple ME. Maximum effectiveness, maximum efficiency, minimum effort. So point 1 is stay in contact. Point 2, never get upset. How many of you have a temper? How many of you have a bad temper? You people are weak. Warriors never get upset.
So it seems like he's joking there, but he was as dead serious as can be. You people are weak. That's back to the NLP thing that you're talking about. I had no idea he was involved with researching the Ars Notoria. You sure about that? That's a real thing?
Yes.
That is highly significant. And the NLP of the sniffer, I didn't know that you were going to get into that, but it is, I think that's like the advanced course that he would teach, is how to use things like that. But there are certain shared NLP triggers that the institutional hierarchies have already got in play to draw on and use without their agents actually having to be cognizant of neurolinguistic programming themselves. So like the police officer's hat, right? They all wear, well, they wear that like octagonal shaped hat, and they come into your house to keep the peace or to ask you questions or whatever it is. And they take off that hat and they hold it down here. That's your NLP trigger for let me into your energy field. Go along with what I'm saying. You're playing host and I'm your guest. That's what this does, taking off the hat. And it works on people, especially the feeble-minded. They'll let them right in. They'll answer any question. They'll stop their domestic dispute. And to be fair, I'm glad that the Rhino went out there and taught the soulless automatons of the armed forces how to do this. Honestly, I'm glad, because there are people that need to be managed in their violent outbursts. If that's not, am I saying that it's a chicken or an egg thing? Like, are those people that way because the state engineers the merry-go-round of our commercial system, where some people have a chair and others don't, and the chairs are constantly getting pulled out of the game, and that's what's bringing it about, all that inequality and whatnot? Or is there something about human nature and in the course of growing a soul, where some souls need to go through these experiences or be on the receiving end of people behaving this way? I don't claim to know, and I'm just going to circumvent all that and say, because there are violent people in the world and people under, so like George talks about how people under the influence, alcohol, rage, despair, anxiety, other drugs, etc. So for dealing with people under the influence, this is great. Or maybe even sometimes dealing with a person under the influence of being a 5-year-old. Some of this can really help in that context too. I'll be honest, like understanding the reasons why as a parent to never say, because I said so, and learning that there's a better way to create the win-win. That's all good. Other NLP triggers that are seated in the hierarchy, the business card. I'm a professional. I'm handing you a business card, right? The cops do that. And they say, you can just give me a call if there's any trouble, and you come to the precinct and pick up your husband in the morning, and just don't resist while I take him away or take away your son or whatever the case. Here's my business card. I took off my hat. These are all NLP triggers. No one necessarily knows, or a lot of the people doing it and definitely on the receiving end don't realize that. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and I think that he was a master of much more subtle arts than what he was actually teaching his classes. And he was using those subtle arts on the classes himself. And it's probably why he was in such high demand and did hundreds of speaking engagements a year for years. Now I'm going to bring up the next slide here in context to the clip we just watched. So me. Verbal Judo is using the other's energy for maximum effectiveness, maximum efficiency, minimum effort. And now you see why in my slides I chose the soy jack on the left and the yes Chad on the right, because meme warfare is verbal judo. On both ends, there's the fact that memes are a communication of maximum effectiveness, minimum effort, and efficiency, and maximum efficiency, but also just the directing of people to engage in meme warfare takes them out of karate, takes them out of offensive action, mount up, patriots, just wait, we're chasing Hillary through the sewer, the storm's coming, all of that stuff, the great meme war. But did anything really change with that? And the irony of the me acronym here is that on the institutional side, the corporate side of verbal judo, me can't even be in the picture. So using other people's energy, redirecting other people's energy as the basis of judo basically, when he talks about that, he just defined the entire philosophy of the state and of managers of the collective. The state has no energy itself. It's made up of people whose energy is redirected. There is no such thing as a group or a collective. Those are fictional concepts. Those are abstractions. And as a corporate entity, does the state or any other corporation have the capacity to get upset? No, it doesn't. It doesn't have emotions. It's a robot. It's a corpse, right? So, and then the last thing that is important about this judo thing in terms of the martial arts metaphor is the stay in contact principle. And he goes into more detail about like techniques to stay in contact, but it has to do with like using language that's self-referential. And so, it's about me and you. You're kind of boiling things down to just the two of you. And like, I'm empathizing with how you feel, and I'm repackaging what you say and sending it back to you so that you know that I'm listening and all of that, whether or not you actually care. That's part of it. We'll talk more about some of those techniques in future slides, but this stay in contact principle is the entire ground philosophy of mass media, political campaigns. How many, and this happens more from the left, in my opinion, the left, that I don't know about you guys out there, but I get about 5 text messages a day that's like, oh, can you believe it? Trump raised $500 million after the debate, and I am heartbroken that you won't sign the petition for him to be disemboweled. Like, it's just crazy. And they're constantly staying in contact. They're always finding new ways to contact you. It's about keeping that touch. And that's part of what all this information accessibility and pipeline is about, is to just improve it's just like economics. Economics works on money velocity. That's the real measure of health of an economy, is not how much money is in it, but how fast the money is flowing from place to place. And the contact question with social engineering is that staying in contact and keeping the information flowing rapidly is what circulates it into all the minds and takes up all the real estate in the psyche of the collective. It's not good enough to just put an idea out there. You have to have the architecture to put it into circulation, into rapid transit, to touch everybody with it. And they really showed how global that circulation, that stay in contact is in the cooties era. I mean, every probably human on the planet that didn't live in a jungle wearing a loincloth knew that there was a psyop, or they were afraid of the thing. So that's really important principle, the stay in contact principle. So know that about people that might be trying to manipulate you, that they will have a tendency to literally like put their hand on your shoulder or brush up against you, like especially psychic vampires, energy vampires. It's part of the getting in. It's NLP triggers. It's the police officer taking off their hat. It's the guy that texts you all the time, even though you've never showed interest in him. And it's the give an inch, they take a mile type of stuff.
Buddy. I'll point out that ritualistically, the taking off of the hat is signifying hat dread. There's a great amount of hat dread that our ancestors were very much responsive to. And so different hats are really, this is your head dress. It is your head dress, is your address, and it tells people where you're coming from. And so they can make a great amount of presumption, even from the hillside afar. They can actually tell what tribe you hail from. And so the displaying of your feathers is still utilized by removing the hat dread. So when he takes it off and puts it on his heart, it's very much like a gesture of sincerity, which at this point, I think we're quite aware that it's all performing art. And then the me, and the keeping a census of contact, of always being tethered to the state. I've talked about the term den Kromverlust. Den Kromverlust is loss of thinking space, and if you researched it, you'll end up with the tourist brochures. You got to really work to penetrate into it. In art, it means conflating the subject for the object, and this is what we are constantly pointing out. When a cop takes your ID and says, "Is this you?" The answer is no. I am me. I am me. That is state property. That doesn't belong to me. If you flip around your social security number on the back side, read very carefully between the lines. It says this belongs to the state treasury department or something, some agency. If found, return to its owner. So if you have read those two lines on your own card, that means this belongs, you should send it into the agency that it belongs to. It's telling you this isn't yours and that you should get rid of it right there on the card itself. And then I love what you mentioned about how the state has no emotional accountability whatsoever. That is so vastly meaningful, that we're dealing with a machine that is utterly remorseless, and in fact prides itself in remorselessness. You know, these guys go home and pat themselves on the back for being a good cog. And then one other thing is sola scripta. Sola scripta, only the book, only the book. That was the battle cry from the Reformation. Was we don't need the church. We got this book, and we can go to the new lands and start a church with sola scripta. Well, these machines and these cogs are only staying on script. They can only say what they're instructed to. So they are in a very limited reality tunnel, extremely limited reality tunnel. But it's amazing that the battle cry of the Reformation, that is also the battle cry of the police when they come to convert you. This is really being pulled over is exactly what the Crusades were doing when they were converting people. They would put them through a test of faith to defile their own God in a way that pleased the God of the Crusaders, in converting you over to their way of life. And so a traffic stop is a modern day crusading conversion. And I want to say the word Islam means submit. So when you are submitting papers, when you're pleading with the judge, all of these self-diminishing practices are in a crazy way converting you. They're converting your standing so that you substand. You don't overstand. You are substanding. You diminish your status. And I got a fun technique that I want to share with everybody real quick on walking the Bagua Xingyi circle with these presumed samurai. This is a really fun one. And, you know, in the heat of the moment, you're not going to remember these details. You'll probably, I would get it wrong if I tried it. But I think it is a very fun counter magic. This is a counter magic. And that is, if you are compelled to give a name to identify yourself, it's your choice as to how you want to be identified. And I watched a fella a while back give the cops the runaround, and I've kind of modulated what he did. But essentially, it goes something like, my name is first letter E, 12th letter X, 5th letter B, 10th letter D, second letter A. And you go back and forth out of order. You remain out of order. And when they get done trying to follow you around the Bagua Xingyi circle of what you're trying to say, they look down on their pad and it reads, "Eat a bag of dicks. Eat a bag of dicks." And when they get upset, when their emotions kick in as to what they wrote down on their piece of paper, you tell them, "Where'd you get that from? Where'd you get that from? That's not what I told you." And you just gaslight the fuck out of them until it's time for them to go home, until the dinner's getting cold on the table. Walk them in the
Yo,
circle.
that is an amazing segue to the next slide and thing that I have queued up for George. Something that I remembered though, you're talking about like claiming your five, or you just need the five, or the Neo holding up his hand and saying no. I couldn't help but notice when you're talking about that, how five is the numerological equivalent of freedom itself, of rejecting the order that was already established or that is imposed and going off your own way. That's the essence of the five. So it's not lost on, you know, the Enneagram side of things either. That's really cool.
Nice. I got one more. Is it's the 1-4. Yeah, 1-4, right? You got the 1 and the 4, and that is letter N. It's the N word. Is N. No, 1-4. Yeah, it's very complete. It's complete. It's a complete magical spell.
Oh
Very
man,
powerful.
I love the context of in conflict that you get them to lose their cool and you did not, without doing anything wrong, you kind of automatically win, right? Here is George talking about the concept of mushin, and it applies perfectly to what you're just talking about with your practical joke concept. It's about a minute long.
It's called tactical civility. It allows me to get close to people if I have to dump them in a police situation. If it's a sales situation, it allows me to make contact and redirect. So let's talk about that. How do you stay calm under verbal assault? That's not natural either, by the way, is it? If somebody insults you and you get upset, you lose. I teach in my longer course a habit of mine known as mushin. Mu means no, and shin means mind, as in still center. As the English word is probably more like disinterested. Okay? Unbiased, open, and flexible. So mushin, see if I can get back to it for a minute, is the state of being surrounded by an attacker and going still center. No biases, no upset, quiet inside, okay?
Okay, so the concept here is personal face. This is one of the things that George brings to the Western audience that is, it's not like the concept doesn't exist here, but we don't understand our own our own way of being, that it's a lever that works on us, the idea of face. It's like we don't even hardly have a word for it, but saving face is such a huge thing in the Eastern cultures that it's like a, you know, you'll die for saving face. It's a kind of like honor, personal honor, you could say. It's how, but it's interesting because it's, those Eastern cultures are generally a lot more collectivized, and their idea of face, it's the external appearance of a thing, right? That's very much like the persona, the mask. What's the person? So, but on an emotional level, what he's talking about is don't lose a fight by being, you know, the first one to start throwing insults is the one that's really no longer a viable position, right? I think that's a good way of putting it. That's what how my wife would put it anyway. Not that we throw insults at each other, but when we observe this in the world, you know, that when somebody no longer has a valid argument in a debate, they throw insults, ad hominem, they call it, right? So in this model, where it says personal face is always a fighting issue, in this model, and he goes into great detail about this, your professional face, which is who or what you represent, has to take priority over your personal face or what your ego wants. So in a negative sense, this is the corporate agent that is a representative of their department, of their state government, of the federal government, of all police officers as a whole, of whatever law they're upholding, and it goes on and on. Whoever trained them, these are the things that they represent, they represent. And so these are the many layers of persona that take precedence over their own egoic self and identity. Now, on a positive level, if you were, for example, a parent and your child didn't want to go to bed on time and they start acting up about it and you're feeling frustrated, well, wouldn't it be better that you appeal to your representation of yourself as a parent than the way that you're sympathizing with their frustration and starting to feel it too, right? So this isn't all bad to know this. Like the way that he would describe dealing with that situation would be the last thing that you do is say, instead of saying calm down, you never say calm down to somebody in a conflict. You say, it's going to be all right. Talk to me. Don't say, what's your problem? Say, what's the matter? Can I help? And this is, again, even better still, if you can make it a question, it's always going to be better received than making it a statement or command. And definitely in a conflict, never make blanket generalizations like you never this or you always that, because it's never true. When you start doing that, that's you reacting to and losing face. And it's like losing face, especially when you start to lie. As soon as you make those broad sweeping statements, you're now entering the realm of lies, and you're definitely not going to diffuse. You're only going to escalate, and you're no longer really in the moral high ground either. But so like, say your kid wants to go to bed or doesn't want to go to bed on time, and you learned from your parents to just say, because I said so, my rules, my way, just do it. Instead, you appeal to what you represent as a dad or a mom, and you say, listen, I really want to be a good dad to you. It's really important for me to be a good dad to you. And a good dad makes sure that their children go to bed at the right time so that the next day they have a more fun day. So can you help me be a good dad? Can you help me make sure that you have a good day tomorrow? You get them on your side. You help them understand the why. This is so important to manufacturing consent or compliance, is to, at least in the moral sense, I mean, immorally too. You can use this immorally too, but it's not necessarily immoral to appeal to the why or appeal to the bigger idea that you're trying to represent. It's just to be aware that can be used against you by, and they'll do that with like policy, it's appeal to policy a lot of times. Like, hey, it's just, you have to get out of the car because that's what the law says and this and that. And, maybe they're right. Maybe in that case, you just want to go along and not ruffle feathers or rock the boat. You're probably in good shape if you get an officer that is appealing to policy and not just ripping you out of the vehicle. So maybe go with it and just stay in the de-escalated zone. But just be aware, at the very least, in conflict resolution, never do anything that is a slight to their personal face. And more specifically, it's about giving them ground to step out onto. So it's like negotiation, giving them a way that they can go along with what you need them to do or what would be best for them, where they don't lose face in the process. So that's kind of like in a nutshell what he goes into more detail about in the book. And I want to continue on into the next slide here in the next clip first, because this is, it will just build on the idea of giving way before the attack, or like before you draw the sword, stepping back, right? Giving way and then redirecting, giving way to the attack, then redirecting. That's what it's all about. And in verbal combat, the attack is insults. So here's a clip of him talking about what he calls in his book strip phrases. And this is where it just straight up is like, man, this is just manipulative, but it's dishonest and manipulative, but it works. It works against violent people under the influence of negative things. So here we go.
Look, natural language would get you pulled into their dynamics. Tactical language tells you to deflect and move. Okay? You're a fat, ugly, but so I can see you're upset. Okay, I got that? I'm sorry you feel that way, but listen to me. See, deflect and move. Some deflectors are, I appreciate that, I understand that, I got that, I hear that. Sorry you feel that way. I have some new ones. I might feel that way too. My wives, whatever. My wife would agree with you. See, the old samurai saying is man throws spear of insult, move head. Then spear miss target. Now he's disarmed, now it's my turn. Okay? Never let insult bother you, just redirect it. These are the deflecting study. You got to use 2 or more of them. Otherwise it's too abrupt. Look, I can see you're upset. I might be too under those conditions, but.
Okay, so man throw spear at head, move head out of the way. This is not what it leads to a guy like this or other slick talkers getting throat cancer or vocal cord cancer, in my opinion, because there is a level of choice when it comes to our emotional response to things. There's some things that you don't have a choice about, like true loss and grief and other sorts of disappointment, right? And the closer we are to somebody, the more difficult it is to get out of the way of that spear because they're throwing it from the proverbially just this far away, right? So, maybe we can't be perfect about this, but if somebody tosses an insult at you in conflict and you become the angry soy jack in this picture here, it's equivalent to the spear just hit you right in the face, right between the eyes, okay? If they throw the insult at you and you don't respond to the insult or you don't get the emotional riled up about it and then attack back with an insult, then the spear has now sailed harmlessly past you. It's stuck in the wall and they don't have that weapon anymore. They can't hit you with that anymore. It had no effect. They're disarmed. So the way that he describes redirecting after giving way to the attack is just letting it happen and not attacking back. Is the redirect is where you say, I understand that, or I appreciate that. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, it's important to make it sound like conversational and like contracted, where you say appreciate instead of appreciate, or understand without the D. I don't know why that is, but according to him, that's like, at least in police work, it's crucial. I'm not sure. But then the other thing that he says about this technique is that it's most effective to use 2 of these types of strip phrases together at once. So you'd say, I understand that, I appreciate that, but, and so whatever, but I need to see some ID, or but I need you to go to bed. Everything after the but is designed to get the job done. After the word but, use only words that serve your purpose or the purpose you're representing. So now comes the big question of like, other than being able to see this coming at you in your own life, potentially, hopefully you're not the person throwing spear of insult at somebody's head, right? But maybe you have a legitimate grievance and it's not an insult you're throwing at them. You're just expressing a legitimate grievance or trying to express a boundary or to use the magic N word and say no. And what you get back is something like a giving way and a redirect of, I understand that, I appreciate that, but yada, yada, yada. You can see that redirect and redirect the redirect and just say no again, right? But be aware that there's something about human psychology and energy flow that when they accept your thing, but then redirect it back at you like that in that way with a command, you're more likely to, without thinking, just go with it. And maybe we're more or less a higher conscious group of people talking about this now, but just to be aware, just be aware that this can be used on you. You can use it on others. It's a tool. It's neutral. It's the intent and the instance of how it's being used that matters. So strip phrases followed by questions, though, are really useful as well. Like, because asking questions is the power position. So whatever you can phrase as a question in negotiating will typically be to your advantage in diffusing things. But I've gone over a lot of stuff, Gabe, about giving face or face as a fighting issue, and things not to say, and the way of redirecting after being attacked or insulted. And I want to hear your thoughts on that, but I also want to explore how these type of strip phrases might work in a marketing sense or a social engineering sense. Is there a version of this where the big machine will give way to our grievance and admit like, yes, that's true, or because that's part of the strip phrases, is just saying, yeah, you're right about that, or I see why you think that, or I agree with you, or whatever. But how much did that occur, at least like in the microcosm of the cooties event, where now they're like, oh yeah, Dr. Fauci, he was up to some no good. I appreciate that. I understand that. But, but we're not going to make any kind of, but you're still going to do what we say. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there's a bigger picture social engineering way that the consent is maintained, whereby the truth being told after it mattered, when it no longer matters. Like, yeah, Joe Rogan can say that people that are against getting cowpokes are kooks and crazy during cooties. And then a few years later, when it doesn't matter, he can speak out against all the tyranny that was going on and be seen as like, oh, he's the anti-cowpoke guy. He's the anti-lockdown guy. He's the real based truther hero, right? Yeah, sure. You see a lot of these talking heads now that it no longer matters speaking the truth. And I think this is part of what is stripping people of their weaponry, in a sense, stripping people of their offensive capacity it disarms them by the agreement. Oh, yeah, I see your point. Yeah, you were right about that, but it doesn't matter anymore. The damage is done. The thing already happened. You already complied, whatever the case. Yeah. So kicking it to you.
Right on, buddy. Yeah, the power differential is an illusion. They've got these guns, they've got the armor, they've got buddies, but they are bound by duty. We have rights, which are not that's not our limitation. That's just one of the many ways that we are have a much larger potential response field that they do not have. And one thing that's kind of fun is that his advice on what not to say to a civilian is exactly the advice that we can turn around for that to dismantle the illusion of a power differential. And that is to say that if you make sure to reiterate, calm down, every time you talk to the cop, it's going to get under his skin. And so all the things you learned that they should not do to you, because they don't want an emotional response, you flip the formula and you do it to them. So
That
every
is
sentence
profound.
you speak to the officer is, hey, calm down. Hey, calm down. Hey, calm down. And if you say that 10 or 15 times, he's going to have to call his buddy in because he's getting hot under the collar.
Well, that
Another
works
technique.
insofar as like if you're prepared to defend yourself against somebody hulking out, because the thing about these guys that are taught to bottle up their true self, repress their real feelings, and avoid what feels good is that only goes so far. And then they think this is the time I can get away with it, or I just can't take another instance of it. And the bottled up thing blows up. So, for you, I'd be like, yeah, great. Goad them. Some moves. You're a big dude. But I wouldn't give. I just want to make that caveat that I wouldn't give that advice to just anybody interacting with the police. Like you got to be
Good point.
the competent dance partner, right? Let's be let's be real about that.
Right, right. Yeah, this is not legal advice for sure. You know, there's another technique that I really love, and it does these suggestions or ideas, they they're not exactly what you should do, but they are mental exercises to change how you might think about the situation. So I'm not giving this as advice. This is a mental experiment to think of what's really happening on the street during we're just going to say a pullover. For one, the oh, they're getting me. Am I good? Am I good yet?
I think you're good. No, you're not so good. Okay. I'm gonna take us into another slide, Gabe. Write down some notes
Oh,
of what you're thinking, and we'll come back to you. It seems to work just fine if we just
am
move
I
on
good?
whenever you're really zapped, and we'll bring it back. So this is another version of giving way that I want to talk about, and that is the power of paraphrasing. And the tenet here is that empathy absorbs tension. This is another one of those principles that is true and can be useful and can be used for good, uh, as much as the big machine can use it for evil. There's like this pseudo shadow empathy that the police training version of this teaches, where it's pretended empathy. I mean, the real meaning of empathy is that you know what the other one is feeling. So in that sense, it's real empathy that they can show, but it's like manufactured empathy, or it's empathy with a duplicitous intent. But in your personal relationships, practicing empathy really is the key to absorbing the tension in a situation, and you have to absorb that tension. If you have somebody that's angry to the point where like they're in fight or flight level angry, they're not operating on the full human neocortex higher brain. They're more in a animalistic state. You can't reason with them. You got to bring them down a few levels by absorbing the tension. That is true. I appreciate this advice. So I want to talk about the power of paraphrasing, because I think this is a take home that you can really use, but also that you can potentially recognize when it might be leveraged at you in negotiation. So what the power of paraphrasing is about is letting them know that you actually listened to them by repeating back to them what they said to you. And this is the one place where interrupting is something you can kind of get away with. So that's something to be aware of too. Like the sword of insertion is what George calls it. When you paraphrase, though, you need to paraphrase what they actually said, not what you think they mean or what you think they should have said. So that's a danger. If you paraphrase what you would have liked them to have meant or what you think they meant, none of that. That will not go over well. Just what they actually said, that's something that diffuses tension. Here's some of the points he makes about this in the book. So I'm going to be reading. This is quoting from George directly. 1, magically in one sentence, by paraphrasing, you've hooked the other person. He's listening. Using the sword of insertion or interruption only really works to your favor with paraphrasing after it to interrupt somebody without generating further resistance. 2, you have taken control because now you're talking and they are listening. 3, you're making sure of what you heard. You're making sure that you heard it right on the spot, not finding out later that you misunderstood. 4, if you have not heard the person accurately, he can correct you. That fills your pockets with ammunition. The more you know about somebody, the better. And the more he speaks, the more he reveals about his emotions, his prejudices, and his assumptions. That can only help you in deflecting insults, keeping their attention, and generating voluntary compliance. 5, You have made the other person a better listener because no one listens harder than they do when they're listening to their own point of view. You're telling them, here's what I hear you saying, and you can bet they want to hear that. 6, you've created empathy. The other person will believe you're trying to understand. Whether you really are interested is irrelevant. What's important is that he thinks that you are, and nothing makes them more certain than that sword of truth insertion sentence of, whoa, let me be sure I heard what you just said, followed by paraphrase. 7, once you have thrust the sword of insertion and pronounced the ultimate empathic sentence, let me be sure I heard what you just said, you have gained attention. Then to effect the 7th benefit of paraphrasing, you want to immediately follow up with something like this. Okay, you are feeling X because of Y. True? The X equals an emotion like anger or frustration, and the Y equals a reason. You don't even have to be right. You're just guessing at this point. For instance, it might go like this. Whoa, listen, let me be sure I understand what you're saying. You're feeling angry because you believe I purposely undermined you in front of your colleagues yesterday at the meeting. Now the person can correct either the emotion you used for X or the reason you used for Y. He might say, well, no, I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. Now you're getting somewhere. Whether he's angry or disappointed will make a difference in where you go from there. Or he might modify X, the reason. Yeah, I'm angry, but I'm not saying you purposefully did it. Notice that my being right is not the issue. Making the attempt to get it right is the issue because I'm appearing concerned, and it allows the upset person to modify their original statements. And that's the 7th benefit of paraphrasing. He's becoming more reasonable without you having to vainly shout, be reasonable, which never works. And 8, paraphrasing overcomes a strange phenomenon I call sonic intention. People often think they have said something because they heard themselves say it in their head or because they had so carefully rehearsed it. So in regards to these principles, there's something that I like to talk about in like dealing with emotions in your own biofield or dealing with other people's bad vibes or negative energy, that accepting is protecting. So we like to think, the default thinking is if you like reject, wow, the way you feel is not okay, or your vibes are not okay, or your anger is toxic, that's your boundary or protection from it. But the real protection is accepting it. It is the empathy. If you accept it, then it's not, it doesn't get in you, spear misses head. That type of metaphor applies. And especially in like close relationship conflict where they might come at you and be like, they're pissed off. They've been bottling stuff up. And now they come at you and they say, you always do this on purpose all the time. And then you paraphrase it back to them. Even though they're wrong, you paraphrase back, whoa, let me be sure I heard what you just said. You're upset. You're mad at me because I always don't take out the trash before the trash guy comes. You're mad at me because I always belittle you in front of your children or something like that. And then they'll, after you paraphrase, because the empathy absorbs tension, they'll come back at you down a notch and be like, well, not always, but a few times lately you have. And, and as he said in the example, and maybe you didn't do it on purpose, but that's still how it feels. So, but if you reject it, you're like, you're crazy. I can't believe you would accuse me of that. There's no way that I do that. Or I don't always do that. Well, now they're back on offense and they're going to escalate further and be, F you. So this is a really helpful communication skill. It doesn't have to just be manipulative. If you want to, it is that aspect of being a good person to listen and the posture of helping someone feel heard and what they said got through to you, that's great. But if you know that you don't always do X and that you didn't do it on purpose, then why would you get upset at the spear thrown at your head that says that you do? It's almost like from their point of view or subconsciously or energetically, when you take that attack and you rile up over it, it's like you're telling them, yeah, you're right. I do that. It hurt me because it's true. The truth hurts. And instead you want to be like, stay in that neutrality. That didn't hurt me what you just said. But let me make sure that I understood what you just said. Did you really mean that? And then, no, I didn't really mean that. And you're starting to work your way towards the middle ground. So like, this isn't all bad. Empathy absorbs tension. If there's one like takeaway, that's a great takeaway.
Yeah, man. I love how you've already seen the way that this can really uplift and enrich your life, in the household and on your personal path and in the career. It's like all these treasures. That's why I'm so grateful for Dr. Rhino. But it also shows us the death plans to the Death Star, and that's Slick Dissident. If you guys can't tell, I actually look forward to having fun with the police. I actually look forward to it. I know that's kind of twisted, but because we're under no obligation to stay reasonable or remain in order. That's why when you give them your name in a broken order, they have evidence that you don't follow orders. And so in my Bullet Man training, when we used to train people to deal with conflict, there was a technique for the Bullet Men to come out and pretend to be crazy. And by donning the likeness of unreasonableness, then they're not going to come to you to be a witness or to be a resource or get dragged into court to give your testimony. And then one more thing about Slick looks forward to playing with the police officers. Again, not legal advice, but philosophically, being pulled over on the side of the street and having an officer come up to your window is identical to having a prostitute come up to your window and solicit you for services. And philosophically, imagine, one second. Imagine pulling out your receipt book. Pull out your receipt book, and the first thing you do is you write down their name and their badge number on the receipt book and their buddy in the car. Go ahead and get their buddy in the car, get their name on that receipt book. Leave space between their names because you're going to be putting information here. And as you are the ass king, you are accumulating evidence on them and reminding them to calm down. Hey, calm down, man. Hey, calm down. And whatever information comes out of them, you turn it back to them. You feed back what you think you're hearing. Okay, let me understand this. So you want to give me legal advice? You're giving me legal advice. Is that what you're saying? This is legal advice? Okay, because the receipt book is going to be necessary for this solicitation of a prostitute who wants to give you some legal advice. And at the end of all the things that you wrote down, by the way, while you're at it, give them a nickname. Give each one of them a nickname. Give them a nickname that hits them right in the heart to boil that kettle nice and hot. And now you're going to charge them. Love and light, love and light. You're going to charge them for the service of the nickname that you administered onto them. And everything they say is, okay, so this legal advice, do you think you can afford this legal advice? Are you insured? Are you insured? Because if I take your legal advice, it might go wrong. Where's the liability in the legal advice that you're giving me? And they're going to constantly say, I'm not giving you legal advice. And you're like, well, if you're not my lawyer, why am I talking to you? And the whole bridge collapses. Furthermore, when they tell you that it's not legal advice and you say, but everything you say is about legality. We're talking about legality and you're advising me to show up someday somewhere to find out what happens. Are you authorized to give legal advice? Because I'm writing down your legal advice. I'm going to need your commanding officer to come here and authorize this receipt. And the commanding officer is going to be like, did you just solicit legal advice? Did you just solicit legal advice through the window? It is basically a prostitution situation. And the reason why prostitution gets most cases are easily vilified is because it's soliciting in public. And because they are in the public, their balls are on the chopping block. And everything you just wrote down on your receipt book is a record. And the number of that receipt is the number that you're going to use when you come to collect the bill of liability. And that is a philosophical way of seeing what's really happening in the power dynamics here. So I'm not telling you any legal advice. I'm telling you that is really what is happening. It is just like a prostitute coming to your window, but you better keep a record so that they don't put the liability on you. And the commanding officer is the final say. And he's the one that you're going to bring this receipt to and serve it to him.
So much good there. So the paraphrasing outside of just your normal interpersonal conflicts, you paraphrase back to the police, the officer, the agent, and they're going to have to de-escalate too if you paraphrase back what they meant. Maybe not exactly how they said it, but what they meant, on the legal sense. That's really cool. This is a great comment here too. Coral Reef Day, Love Horses Week. You've always got excellent nom de jour. It says, in real life, stating to the pig, "You're okay. I have no duty of care," 3 times, followed by, "I don't answer questions. Worked. Likely saved my life. Gratitude to Crow 777. That's probably in context to like wearing a mask or something that, yeah, I have no duty of care. Then now you're speaking there. You're no longer speaking natural language to them. You're turning the rule book back on them. You're using verbal judo by saying that, because duty of care is legalese. It's the obligation. It's the obligation to perform. You're stating very clearly, I'm not obligated to perform the way that you are asking me to perform. That's pretty badass. I love that. And I got to say thanks to Yvonne for the super chat. Thank you, Yvonne Renee. Love and light and gold. Indeed. Love that. Now let's go. We got a few more slides to get through, man. And we're getting a little long in the tooth, although this is such important material. I mean, I don't think we should rush it per se, but we'll keep trucking. We'll just keep trucking. The next, the next issue is the greed principle. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So this is a big part of negotiation. This is Rhino, a little more than a minute. Here we go.
And the 4th is huge. It's calling us the WIIFM principle. The greed principle. What's in it for me? Are most people selfish, yes or no? Okay, think of negotiation for a minute. The principle of negotiation is give in order to get. You have equal power, you give, but you got to be prepared to give if you want to get something. Now, the greed principle. Look up here. If you want somebody to do this, whatever this pen is it perfectly sensible that if you wrap it and what they have to gain or lose, they'll do it? Nobody goes against his selfish interests once they're clearly pointed out. Nobody, unless they're crazy. Nobody. The secret of good negotiation is to paint a clean picture, specific picture, rooted in their greed, not yours. It's what's interest for them. Look, good writers know this. When you write, what comes first? The point for the reader, not your point. What's the point for the reader of the document? They take semesters to teach people how to write. I can teach you to write in 2 days.
Okay, so what's in it for me question. Now that can be applied. I'm putting this in the framing of ethics, right? This is an ethics question. In the context of the dad that wants their kid to go to bed, if you wrap that imperative in the offer that, hey, you're going to have a more fun day tomorrow, have you really done harm? You're promising, or you're giving something in a sense, but is it something, you're not taking anything to give them that, right? Your intentions are good, but in a con artistry sense, con artistry in a nutshell is using words to raise someone's expectations and then using those expectations to cheat them. I've never heard a more succinct definition of con artistry. So in social engineering, this aspect of negotiation is at the forefront of everything all the time, right? I mean, how many ways does the science trademark promise you the future utopia, or the socialism promise you the future utopia, or the religion promise you the heavenly afterlife, or the Ponzi schemer offer you the easy get rich plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's always about raising their expectations and then using those expectations to cheat them. And by cheat them, it's to get them to give you what you want, and you may never even meet the expectations that you've raised them to once you got what you want. And that's the evil genius art of the deal. But this idea of ethics comes from character, ethos in Greek. It's like your character. But that also implies the concept of performance as well, because a character is in a play. Everything George describes as acting. And he clearly states that at times in his book and in his lectures, that you're acting. It's showtime, baby. Like Gabe so perfectly points out. I want to show the gray area of all this, though, a little bit in a story from his book that is, it's not a situation that we're likely to encounter ourselves. And who knows? This guy's a master manipulator. Maybe this story is made up to get you on board. He's giving you is the expectation of being like a superhero with these skills and getting you to buy in. I don't know. This might not be a true story, but it could be true. Something like this could happen, right? So here's the story. I'm going to just be reading directly from the Verbal Judo book. I answered a call one night that a man was holding his son hostage with a knife. His apartment was surrounded by the SWAT team, and the man was in a corner about 20 feet from the door, holding a knife to the throat of his son, who appeared to be about 7 years old. As he approached the door, which was partially barricaded, the man shouted, "Stay where you are, pig. I'll kill you and the boy." I stopped and held up my hands. "Whoa," I said. "I'm not coming any closer." "What's the matter, sir?" He said. "I have to kill my boy." I said, "What do you mean you have to kill your boy? You don't have to kill him. There are many things you can do besides kill him, aren't there?" "No, I've got to kill my boy." "Well, tell me about it." He said, "My boy's possessed of the devil. My ex-wife was a she-devil, and she poisoned his soul, poisoned his blood, and I've got to bloodlet him. I've got to cleanse him, cut his throat, and cleanse him or the devil will take him forever." Here I am, a professional at the door thinking, this guy's crazy. Clearly I had a problem, and it wasn't hard to define. The crazy man was the problem, and my job was to take the knife away and save the boy's life and arrest the man. The thing is, there are always two kinds of problems in any difficult encounter. Your problem, as you define it as a professional, and the problem from the other person's point of view. If I had stopped at my problem and begun my discourse there, I'd have yet a third problem bigger than either of the two I already had. I saw the man as a problem. He saw the boy as a problem. If I approached him as if he were the problem, he would have merely disagreed and resisted, and at worst killed the boy and maybe some of us cops in the process. This is the epitome of what I call the rhetorical problem, how the other person sees it. And he will never see it the way you do, especially if he's crazy or under the influence or delusion. I've learned the hard way that the only way to succeed in these situations is to define the problem from the other person's point of view first. Frankly, the first thing I said to the man was wholly ineffective. I said, "But sir, wait a minute. The blood that runs in the veins of the boy runs in yours. If you cut his throat, that's your identity going into the floorboards as well as his. Think about it." He wasn't buying. He screamed, "No, I said the blood was poisoned. It's poisoned." So I came at him a different way, with a new kind of appeal. "But wait a minute. Why would you give your ex-wife power? She'd love to see you kill the thing you love the most in order to save it. That only makes her look good and feel good, but it takes from you the very thing you love." I thought that was a pretty powerful argument because I was looking at it from only my point of view. I certainly wouldn't kill someone I loved in order to save him. But my approach angered the man. He zoomed from a 7 to a 9 on the emotional scale of 1 to 10. "Good work, Thompson." He jiggled the knife at his son's throat and said, "She's a dead woman anyway. I'm going to kill her later." Finally, I came to my senses and began to try to work with instead of against the man. I said, "Whoa, wait a minute. What if I told you, sir, that I know a priest who just by passing his hands over your boy can get the evil spirit out? That way you keep the thing you love the most and your ex-wife loses." He looked at me for a minute, clearly stunned. "Do you really know somebody like that?" And I said, "You bet I do. He owes me some favors. Listen, let me talk to him and see if we can get him here." But I can't trust you. You're a cop. I candidly didn't know what to do with that at the moment, so I deflected it with a strip phrase. Sir, I appreciate that, but trust is not an issue at this point. Imagine the absurdity of that, but it worked. I can't help you. I stand before you unarmed for a good reason. Only the priest can help you. To make a long story short, he put the knife down. If I had dwelt on my perspective that the man was the problem, even though I was right, I couldn't have helped. I had to see the problem as he did, so I could seem to be working with him to get it solved. That also saved the boy's life, so mission accomplished. While it may have seemed absurd for me to buy into his craziness of seeing the boy as the problem, I did it for the bigger benefit. So this is this is a crazy example, obviously, but we can take this out of the extremity of that situation, whether or not it was true or fictional. I mean, this guy was an English PhD from Princeton, so he'd have no trouble concocting some powerful fiction, no doubt. He lives in fiction. It's showtime. But the principle, I think, is really true in the art of the deal of life, that what causes impediments in conflict is the inability to work with each other's goal or work with each other's problem. And ethically speaking, unless it's coming down to saving somebody from death or bodily harm, I do not think that it's going to be very good for your throat chakra energy or your soul to, act like you're there to solve their problem, to get them to solve your problem, and then leave them hanging. But in, relationship dynamics, I think that would go a long way towards a win-win situation if you just get out of trying to solve your thing, which might be, my problem is that you're accusing me of something that's not true, and instead go from the perspective of, how can I solve her problem or his problem? Their problem might be they're expressing, you always do this, you never do that. And you throw that back at them like, whoa, you're saying, let me get this straight. You're saying that I never show you that I care about you? Well, you don't never show me, but I feel like lately you don't show me that you care very much. And then you come back to, well, I never wanted to do that. So what can I do to show you that I care more often? How can I change that? And then you're solving their problem. And if you're ethical, you're going to actually change your behavior to fit the solution that they're offering that would be a solution for them. And then you're solving your problem in the process, which is they're accusing me of something that's not true. I do really care, and I mean to show it. So I'm going to meet them in the middle. So this is all very helpful in de-escalation, is that especially as if you want to be in control of the situation and keep it from going wilder, keep it from going to divorce court or a broken friendship, then put your problem aside and work on theirs. And that's like being the bigger person, you could say, sure. So I like that story. I don't think we're going to run into a lot of versions of the thing that this guy talked about in the demon blood and all that, but there are hostage situations in the world. And I'm, again, glad that people have this knowledge in dealing with those who are under the influence. But one thing to add to this is there is one version of using words to raise expectations in a conniving way, kind of. And I'll admit, I've done this. I've advised people to do this in the past, and I'm kind of rethinking it now on the con artistry side of how it's too close to con artistry for me now. So I don't advise this. I rescind any times I've ever said to do it. I was joking. But the prefacing of criticism with compliments, especially just kind of general, non-specific feel-good compliments, the goal would be to soften the criticism or generate compliance, right? And it can work. But if you do that too regularly, it's going to make all of your praise in the future seem disingenuous. I think it might be better to reverse that. So do the critique and then maybe compliment, so that at least you're not being dishonest about why you're having the conversation in the first place by leading with the praise, and also to make the compliments authentic and very specific and situational, not just general, that will make it feel more real. But just be aware, like I'm noticing on an ethics level, hey, this is something I've done. This is something I've that's kind of con artistry. I'm raising their expectations of how I see them before I then sort of try to use that to cheat them into complying with my desire or doing what I want them to do, in other words. So yeah, that's all that. And then of course, if it's freely given, are you the product? Of course, that's a big question of the art of the deal. How much of is given to us for free by con artists who actually are using that give to do some taking, right? I think that goes without saying.
Yeah, buddy. Yes, very profound that we're in the context of greed, avarice, which is on the Enneagram, the number 5 personality type. Jealousy, greed, and jealousy are very tightly bound. Jealousy is not envy. Envy is wanting what other people already have. Jealousy is coveting what is yours. And I think that the story about the hostage situation, it was very psychologically revealing when he had to kind of trial and error his way into uh, honoring the jealousy of the situation. The man with the hostage, he is coveting what is already his. He's going to keep to his own. He's not interested in what you have to offer. And so the officer had to actually validate what he has and offer to make it more valuable. I can actually help heal the child that you have. And that was playing into the vice of covetedness and saying, I can expand or accentuate your investment. I can make what is yours even better if you just negotiate a little bit. That's very insightful. That is totally in the context of greed and not envy. That is such a fine line. And then with raising expectation, something I'm catching on to in life at large is the use of the word just. I believe that there is the even temperament spell is not simply musical. There's some research coming around right now about even temperament coming out of Plato's Republic as basically settling for second best musically, just for the sake of good and close enough is perfect. But even in our culture, we are also implicit in this even temperament spell. And oftentimes, when you hear somebody or catch yourself saying, "Oh, that's just X," the word "just" is a habitual oversimplification for a desperate grasp at having command on a thing. If you can make it just this, it belongs to you now. And now you can manipulate it the way you want. But the
I'm
fact of the
just
matter is,
trying. I'm just
right.
trying.
Yes.
When you say
And so
just, a
in
lot of
so
times what
many,
it actually means is really. That's what Jen says. It's like when people say just, they are actually saying, I really this instead of I just this. I really
nice.
like that what you're
Yes.
saying, man. That is quite a spell. Yeah.
The adjustment card. This even temperament spell is a whole nother show in and of itself, but I'm catching on to its nature. And I think it has a great deal to do with the wet blanket that has been put over the 11th Aristotelian virtue, that is righteous indignation, which, like yourself, Chance, I don't like the wording that is describing the human experience. I think there's a better phrasing. Long story short, I think we should call it requited indignation. But even the word indignation might need some adjusting. Uh, So yeah, I think that validating other people's experience actually gives you power in a way that our generation and the generations to come might lose their opportunities by not validating the experiences of others. And so the even temperament spell, I think unpacking that is very rewarding, because by validating others, you actually gain validation in their eyes. So yeah, the word just is something we should be careful with, as I think it is the wet blanket that is snuffs out righteous indignation that needs a better name.
And it's all this is a perfect example of what I learned just from doing biofield tuning. Just like I did not know this concept until I had to figure it out through tuning, and that is accepting as protecting. It was accepting that that crazy guy needed his son to not have poisoned demon blood that protected the boy from the knife. You know, it wasn't, I reject those bad vibes. You've got horrible energy. You can't be like that. I don't want anything to do with that. Don't do that. Stop. No, that wouldn't have gone anywhere nice. Right. So that's a crazy example in an external example, but in your internal life and internal world, the best protection you've got against other people's negative energy is being okay with the fact that they've got it. It is what it is, right? Now, on the boundaries level, why that's also important is there's a great deal of the vampiric type of energy that actually thrives on the being rejected, thrives on making you uncomfortable with it, thrives on getting under your skin with it, or you know what I mean? And that if you're like cool and copacetic, like, yeah, you are how you are, they'll probably just leave, or they won't be attracted to you. They're not going to be able to juice you the same way. And this is an interesting topic. It's not that you never say no or put your foot down. There are situations too, sure. But in general, my opinion about boundaries is that it's inner work. It's inner work. And the external boundaries you have with people or situations resolve themselves based on your inner relationship to the vibes that are involved there, right? So you might go around trying to cut people out of your life that you call toxic, but because you've got toxic energy inside yourself that you're rejecting and not integrating, because that's what it is on the internal level, then you just draw more of it to yourself everywhere you step. You're putting your foot in the doo-doo, right? So what good were your hard and harsh boundaries anyway? And the way that they made the others feel like, wow, I'm a bad person. They don't want anything to do with me, versus they just kind of naturally fall away or forget about you, or don't feel as interested in seeking to gain from you because you're not given. Your spear missed target, did not go into head, insult did not affect me, but you accepted the insult. That's the whole art of deflection. Is it's okay that you said that. It didn't do anything to me, even though you said that. Or it's okay that you feel that way. Didn't do anything to me. Great stuff. Great realizations to hold and apply. Let your boundaries sort of form of their own accord. Yeah, you might have to go put in your 2 weeks notice in a job. I'm not saying there aren't times where you have to set the boundary manually. It happens. But in a lot of ways, things happen of their own accord based on your internal relationship to energy. And I think we'll talk about that a bit more a couple slides forward. We're almost there, folks. This looks like might be a 3-hour one, but this is a gem. Like, this is like a unique piece of content right here. I'm really enjoying it. Now, I'm sure Gabe's got a lot to say about this subject, but this is asking as king. Asking. So part of verbal judo is staying in the role of the questioner as much as you can, even framing things as questions that you might not have naturally formed as a question is a very powerful form of verbal judo. And what I wanted to focus on are the types of questions that exist that George talks about in his book. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book, not as much as last slide. The types of questions are fact-finding. That's the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Fact-finding questions are for specific data. Most people are naturally pretty good at these because they often concern practical matters and require only clear-cut answers, but they don't often have the best effect on people. So be aware, fact-finding questions can be, are not necessarily your friend in de-escalation. In fact, if you're in a heated situation, if someone's over a 5 out of 10 on the anger threshold, or under the influence of crazy, of just what do the facts matter when you're dealing with someone irrational? Just drop the fact-finding questions in those situations. Not helpful. 2, general questions. General questions are open-ended. For example, what really happened here today? In a reply to a general question, a person can say anything he wants. This allows him to choose the direction of his answer and makes him feel good. So general questions, generally useful. Opinion-seeking questions are, and I left one, oh no, I got them all in here. Opinion-seeking questions ask for an opinion and allow latitude. You might ask, is there some way we can solve this problem? What's your view of how we ought to go about this? This approach is very powerful because most everyone likes to voice his opinion. Even if you're not terribly interested in the answer, ask anyway, and remember to look interested and to make it obvious that you're listening. You may be surprised. The person may even have something profitable to say. So we're going to come back to the opinion-seeking questions. Direct questions are basically your yes and no questions. Did you dump the garbage on this man's lawn? Did you go to so-and-so's house? Did you spend the money? Though the direct questions themselves may not be antagonistic, too many direct questions in a row can make people feel machine gunned. I had a problem with this when I was a new cop because I was more interested in getting information from my reports than I was in being empathic for those involved. Direct questions kind of fall into the same category as fact-finding, and they often are rapid fire, where it is kind of an assault because you're getting them to it's similar to the leading questions as well. Basically, you're conforming them to your opinion of reality or your perspective of reality. And you got to be aware that that does not de-escalate typically. Leading questions almost always anger people because they essentially put words into their mouths. Isn't it true that yada, yada, yada? So that's kind of self-explanatory too, that you're not going to do well with leading questions. The advice George gives is setting context for people before questioning. He calls it forecasting. Interesting use of words. Forecasting. Simply explaining the direction and purpose of your questioning before you start firing questions. Like, I have 6 or 7 questions here concerning the cause of your trouble. Would you be willing to work with me and try to answer them? That way, they don't feel like they're having to hold this tension of being on guard for like question after question after question. They're like, okay, I can answer 6 or 7 questions or 3 or 4 questions, and that lowers the resistance level as well. He talks about, varying your questions among the types can be helpful. But the biggest deal here is opinion-seeking questions generate compliance. That's the one to remember. He goes on about that. Opinion-seeking questions generate compliance. Use that for what you will. I mean, I think it's obvious to the intelligent people that hang out at this channel that that's the entire purpose of politics, yo. Hey, we got a poll for you. We're polling. What's your opinion about the performance of Orange Man Bad or the Fresh Prince of Smell Hair? Oh, yeah. Voting is an opinion-seeking question that generates compliance. You voted with the acceptance that even if who you voted for wasn't elected, that they would be in charge. So whenever you find yourself being questioned for your opinion, be aware that there might be a subtle play for your compliance baked into that, and act accordingly. Maybe don't give your opinion out so freely. Especially in dealing with combative, conflict-oriented people. They might try to draw the energy of conflict out of you that they feed on by seeking your opinion. So, hold your opinion to yourself is actually a really powerful form of judo as well. And empathy wise, de-escalating, resolving tension through empathy is getting their opinion. You know, you can use this for good and it can be used against you for evil. I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. Capiche?
Yeah, buddy. You know, one of the another point of leverage. So when you're in a pullover situation or engaged with the officers, the seeking of facts, the fact finding, is a negotiation. And it's actually hidden within the Second Amendment, the right to bear ARMS. And that means the obvious, but it also means adjustable rate mortgage securities, which is really fun military joke about, know, your what type of firearms you have, because they're at adjustable rate and they secure your mortgage. But it also means that you always have the right to change the nature of the contract on the fly at the spur of the moment. Um, and this is a helpful thing to just encourage you not to feel cornered. Never feel cornered. You have the larger reality bubble. You are not bound by duty. You have more than rights. For them to say, oh, you have to stick to your rights. No, you don't. You got way more than rights on offer, depending on your level of playfulness. But I always like to point out if you look up what a boondoggle is, a boondoggle is a very interesting formula. It that among many other things, it means that the state oftentimes extracts benefit for their private use, and then onto the public they give liability. So the benefit goes to private, and the liability or the cost goes on to the public. And that boondoggle recipe is in a great many other things. It's also a cool word. But when you're in these negotiations, something you should think about in the formula of the boondoggle is that uh, the facts that they are finding, they seek to benefit from, and you get left with the liability of the exchange. And so, one thing that is really interesting, a lot of folks never
I'm gonna
thought
insert,
about.
Gabe. Let me
Yeah,
insert that
yeah,
the boondoggle is the science trademark. It's all of the thing like government programs and big data research and things where there's no actual benefit to society, but it's a boondoggle of a black hole of resources for the people to continue generating wealth that are, doing the project that is pointless. But what is the project that's pointless? They're asking questions, endless questions that really have no relevance or that aren't that helpful of questions, but they're in the mode of research and development that is a wealth extracting con, essentially. And
yes,
you give people the
yes,
expectation, you, you raise their expectations about how, oh, we just need the science for science's sake. And that's part of what will eventually lead us to our future utopia. So keep funding more grants, please. Or the filibuster continues on the Senate floor perpetually. I just wanted to point that out. Yeah, the boondoggle is a great point of verbal judo. Even if it might not be conversational, like all of this techne is through language. All of this
yeah,
research and development is language based. It's all technology, which is the definition of
yeah,
technology
man.
is technical jargon.
Yep, yep. So yeah, the boondoggle formula, it expands into so many things. You just never thought of it that way. Another example is this is like the if it's free, you're the product, but also, when they swipe your nose and then they get all of your DNA, but they only tell you if you're positive or not. But they got all of your DNA, but you're only going to benefit from one little smidgen of the potential information exchange. Same thing with the temperature gun. I was telling my friend about, when they take your temperature, they don't, all they say is you can go or you have to leave. They don't actually tell you what your temperature is. That the benefit of that exchange is on their side of the gun. and they're not going to even tell you what your temperature is, let alone consider that you might have been on a jog or had too much coffee. But another thing about the boondoggle and the exchange of benefit for in leaving you with liability is your home address. A lot of folks never consider the fact that you're dealing with people who are going to find out where you sleep at night. And that is a very insidious uh, um, uh, mm, disempowerment. It's an insidious disempowerment. And so bargaining chip on the while you got your receipt book, and I'm serious about that receipt book, folks. Basically, if you have the receipt book, you are boondoggling them. You're taking information for your benefit in the future, and they're going to end up with the liability because you got the receipt book. You're the glorified secretary here. You might not have a gun, you might not have body armor, but you got all the equipment that a real glorified secretary needs. And so on that receipt book, you need their address. You need to know where they live. And you might even throw in what's your wife's name? Throw that in there. You're under no duty, you're under no obligation. All of these things are turning the tables. And if you don't do it, that's also fine. But this is the attitude adjustment that is important to just consider as you move into this power differential. There is a grand attitude adjustment needed going forward. So I just wanted to say that in the context of fact finding.
Legally speaking, if you become the secretary, you're their manager now. Like in legal speak. If you start performing as a secretary, you are now managing their entire office. It's I'm not even kidding about that. That's like, go look up the old definition of secretary, Webster's 1828, an officer whose business is to superintend and manage the affairs of a particular department of government. Yeah. So you act like one, you'll get treated like one. And it goes both ways. Showtime, baby.
That's right, man. Showtime, baby. Showtime. You put that on the receipt too. So I love to insinuate that with everything that I'm saying is basically I learn how they work, and I realize that not only are we able to do the same, we actually can do way more than they're allowed to. Like we are so free. We are so free and so powerful, and we don't need a gun. You just got to be playful. So another thing that you can do on the receipt book is give them a nickname. And then you can charge them for the nickname that you gave them. And the reason that I can say this dynamic and throw it into the theoretical ethers is because when they call you sir, they're giving you a nickname, and it's a nickname of benefit. Sir is a very magical word, isn't it, Chance? Ser is a great magical term. It has so much meaning packed through history. And in this context, it means extra. I'm going to call you extra. And this is an honorary title. And I'm going to treat this as good cop. I'm going to treat you nice. But as soon as you don't work for me anymore, I'm going to call you bitch boy. But as long as you're working for me, I'm going to call you sir. Now, hear my words closely. As long as you work for me, I will call you a name you like. But as soon as you stop doing my job for me, I'm going to call you a name you don't like. Now, hear the words. You're doing my job for me. If you're doing their job for them, that is a bribe. They're in exchange for you doing their job. What they pay you in exchange is a nickname that you actually like. It feels honorable. And at any second, if you stop bribing them, if you stop working for them, bribing them, then they're going to switch your name into bitch boy. That entire philosophical dynamic can be flipped on a dime if you got that receipt book ready to go. The pen is so much mightier than the sword, y'all.
Funny thing about the word sir is that it means more literally when you address someone as sir, that they work for you, not the other way around. That's the irony of it. Because who grants the title of sir? It's the king to the knight. You know, whether it's Sir Caddington
That's
or
right.
it's a sirloin and you're a cow. You're a piece of meat. But that's that's I don't know if you knew this, but that's actually allegedly, it's kind of like an old folklore maybe. I don't know if it's true, but that the word sirloin comes from an old English king knighting a piece of beef as a joke. And then it just became like a running joke. That's off subject though. But that is food for future thoughts. You have a memory that's a steel trap. So I can't wait to see where that boomerangs back with some crazy schizophrenic interpretation that we're not expecting at the last moment. Okay, so we're almost there, guys. We're gonna go through one more clip, last clip from old George. And this is the longest one, but it's still only a minute and a half. Here we go. This is the tactical 5-step, or the 5-step hard style, he calls it.
By the way, in all cultures, people would rather be given choices rather than threats. And in all cultures, people would like a second chance, right? Here's your second chance. Confirm. My point is confirm. As a cop, I'd say, sir, is there anything I can say to get you to cooperate and step from the car for me? So we don't need to go to jail and make all this trouble for you? I'd like to think so, sir. See, if you put it nicely, voice has to be friendly there, too. He can do what? Cooperate. See, here's the great secret in dealing with people. Ready? You've got to learn to help people build ground to stand on. Help people build ground so they can save face. If they can save face in a negotiation or in the bargaining, the chances of winning are very good for you. And secondly, notice by using the 5 steps, step 5 is act. In case you don't get 2 pages of that, it's act. See, there they are, not linear. You either act, you go call the cops, call the principal, stop talking, but talk is over. I went so far, Your Honor, as to ask him, would words work? And he said no. So I had to use force. I've never had my kids not do it when I got to 4.
Okay, so the 5 steps he's referring to is you're asking, setting context, giving options, confirming if they're going to comply or not, and then you ask, or then you act to either disengage or escalate. So the asking would be like, are you going to this or what have you? Setting context also can come before asking, as we talked about, especially if you have a lot of questions. But the giving options part is what I wanted to hone in on. Is in negotiation, it's always going, like the goal is always going to be to make it feel like it's their idea, to comply. I guess, okay, the asking also is where you ask the question, you repeat it at steps 1 and 4, 1 and 4, right? Is there anything I can do to get you to comply? And it sounds very police officery, right? But that can be helpful in negotiating with children as well. Sometimes, and
Totally.
one thing that to bring humanity back to this as well, that is not as accessible in negotiating with grown-ups or the state, but in negotiating with children, is if you can make it fun. That's part of setting context. If you can reverse things to fun instead of an impasse, like I need you to take a bath and they don't want to do it. Instead of throwing your hands up and being like, I'm dragging you in there by your ear, you rock up on all fours and be like, okay, all aboard the magical bath beast, taking you to the whimsical land of water tub. And there's fairies in there that need you to rescue them from under the water. And like, let's go and make it a game. Little kid will go for that every time. So that can apply to adults in a more simplified version of just making sure to take responsibility for your own energy. That's the setting of context. Like, instead of the rolling your eyes or tapping on your wrist or giving the vibe of impatience or frustration, make the decision. The context of this interaction is, I'm stoked to be here. I'm glad that I'm here. I'm happy about this engagement, and I'm fine no matter the outcome. And you see them in a positive light. Those are some things to keep in mind. I don't really want to go too hard on the 5-step hard style. Suffice to say, this is a big part of George's whole teaching program, and he goes into a lot more detail about it in his book and in his one video that's still allowed to be on the internet. Logan, thank you for this super chat, buddy. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. You're the best, dude. Always supportive. Love you, dude. Now, as we're getting to the wind down, this is the philosophical question I want to pose to everybody, that everything in your outer world is a reflection of your inner world, or in an allusion, not illusion, but it's alluding to your inner world. And there's this amazing aspect about our inner world on a biological sense, that you have two brains. Now, the important thing to realize, first off, is your brain is not the source of your consciousness or your sense of self. That is independent of your biology. You can have the sense of self and all other forms of sensory experience outside or disconnected from a body. Just have an OBE and you'll know that. But in the body, in the material existence, in the conversation between the intelligence of our body and our sense of self, or the different versions of ourself that live in our psyche simultaneously, whatever the case may be, in our interactions with the inner world and the outer world, there is this left-right divide. But important thing to understand about this divide is the left brain has a lot of the analytical power, and the right brain has a lot of the imaginative power. But the right brain has some analytical power, and the left brain has some imaginative power. So it's not like this divide. Think of it more like a yin-yang, right? Left brain has more order and less emotion, but it's got some emotion. The right brain's got some order. It's got some logic on the right. Okay, so it's not like this left and right hard, fast divide. And in your interactions with people, remember that too. Like, if you're coming from the place of I'm orderly and they're emotional, I got to remember they've got some order in there. They've got some logic in there, and we can reach to touch that. But the biggest part about this, as how it plays out in the inner world, outer world dynamic, is that if you're at war within yourself, if your left brain is attempting to master your right brain, if you enslave yourself to things that, your logic or your analysis says you must do, but your right brain, your emotions, your imagination, your intuition tells you, I don't want to do this. And you enslave yourself in that way. You force yourself to go to a 9-to-5 that you hate. You force yourself to this or that, and it's a fear-based or some other negative reason that motivates it. You're going to encounter more problems with master-slave issues, or people trying to domineer or subvert or influence you subtly or overtly, if that's your inner state. So be aware of that. And it causes people having this back to front causes a lot of woe and suffering in the world. Trust me, I've been there. That you think, you see the world as this thing that can't possibly support you, because everywhere you turn, there's someone trying to extract something from you, or some trying to pull the wool over your eyes, or trying to control you. So how in that world could I ever find the synchronicity flow to generate abundance just by existing? To find what I needed to continue to exist just by following what's fun or what gives me authentic joy. I can't do that. The world doesn't have that in it. All I see are the controllers. All I see are the broken people. But what's actually happening is your left brain is controlling your right brain and tamping down all of those aspects of yourself because of the fear that you have to survive. And then everywhere you see in the outer world is your own left brain reflecting back at you in the external. That's like, you must do this. You can't do that. I hope you understand what I'm saying here. You got to snap out of it, guys. You got to snap out of it. And one way to know that you're in it is if, the percentage of time that you spend doing things that are not an authentic hell yes to you, full body hell yes. I promise you, and it might take an adjustment period because you have to retrain your inner dynamics, the way your sides relate to each other. But I promise you, it is safe and effective to live based on only what is a full, authentic, full body hell yes, and saying no to other stuff. Okay? Don't get me wrong. Doesn't mean that there aren't uncomfortable things that you put yourself through intentionally to make yourself grow. Doesn't mean that there aren't challenges or conflicts to overcome and grow through. But it's not the same kind of situation as the I'm stuck of being in this master-slave relationship with life and the thing to know too is every master, every middle manager has a higher manager above them. Every orc lieutenant answers to a Balrog, answers to a Sauron, answers to a Cthulhu, answers to the Demiurge. It goes on, right? It never ends. So get out of those vertical hierarchies in your life. It's possible. Life is waiting. The real life is waiting for you outside of that on the horizontal flat level playing field of the true wish generating reality that you're in. Just be aware.
Amen.
You're getting exactly what you wish for. And that's like all of this conflict resolution stuff in the external world is to help you see how you're at conflict or war inside yourself and to give to get, give your right brain time to be creative, give your emotions acceptance, give yourself enjoyment for the sake of it. Maybe it's the other way around for you. Maybe your right brain is the one kind of smashing down your left brain. That's much more rare, right? But you're in pure chaos. Well, impose some order on yourself. Sure. It's all about the balance. Just wanted to say that. See Beth in the chat. Hey, Beth, it's okay that you missed it. We'll cover a lot of this stuff with you tomorrow, I think it looks like, or a different spin of it, I'm sure. But yeah, Gabe and I are going to be on Beth Martin's King Hero podcast tomorrow. It's going to be a good time. So it was part of why we need to wrap this bad boy up so we can be fresh and bushy-tailed for that.
Absolutely. So, some things to add to that, getting out of the narrowness of options. I've recently come to understand and appreciate how car insurance serves as a Dumbo's feather. It gives a sense of confidence, a needed sense of confidence that all your paperwork is in order and the high ideals are in place to protect you if something should go bad. And that Dumbo's feather, it's fascinating how it ends up playing out if you ever have to call on it. If your bluff is ever laid to bear. And I want to just make a short list of some things we've talked about tonight and also add a couple other things on that list that are even stronger Dumbo feathers. The insurance thing is like, okay, everything's in order. And if it goes bad, it's all accounted for. And it gives you confidence, much needed to be out. I mean, we all take huge risks on the road. But there are other levels of confidence building that we could also use to have an entire Dumbo's fan, in fact. And this is to help so that you're not going to be put in a situation where you have to bluff. You don't want to bluff. whatever comes out of you, you want to be able to back it up. And so your Dumbo's feather turns maybe into a couple Dumbo's nunchucks, one of which is name dropping, the ability to name drop with confidence. Know the commanding officer, know a couple things about him, so you could maybe express familiarity. Know the name of the mayor, know the name of some of the judges, maybe go into traffic court periodically and get a sense of how things go, so that the empty threat of traffic court is even more empty because you're familiar with how things go there. These are little practices to just get yourself in a sense of confidence so that you're not intimidated by the slightest implication of, now you don't want to go down to the station. And in fact, do a ride along, do a week of ride alongs with the police so that you have them on a first name basis. And if you got a rookie pulling you over, you can drop some of the names of the big heads at the station on a first name basis. These are very strong uh, uh, implements to give yourself confidence, to earn your confidence so you're not bluffing. The other one, besides name dropping, uh, know the lawyers, get familiar with the lawyer community. And if you are in a situation where you feel like you're getting legal advice solicited onto you, like a prostitute off of the streets, have your lawyer on speed dial and have proof that they're on their way. And we all got to sit here and wait until your lawyer gets here to represent you. Don't let them uh, uh, find some state-sponsored sideswipe. Have your own lawyer, right, locked and loaded. Another one for people who drive dirty. Back in my younger days, this is advice for those of you who run dirty, and some people run dirtier than others. Have that tow truck ready to call before they even get to the window. If you're running dirty, you want that tow truck already on your way before they break in with the first line. And the first thing you should say is the tow truck's on the way. And then you don't have to talk about all the things in between because your vehicle is going to get safely removed from the road, and they're not going to charge you the state price. You get to pay the price that you choose, and you do that in advance. Take that move in advance. Bail bonds. If you got it, get your prepaid bail bonds, especially if you're going to go do some protesting. If you're going to go do protesting, pay in advance to get yourself out of jail before you even go there. That is a Dumbo's feather that will help everybody when it comes to taking to the streets. Prepaid bail bonds. And then that receipt book. I tell you what, that receipt book is the most brilliant thing I ever heard of. I have a couple of them to spare. But yeah, the receipt book is powerful. You're keeping your own records. You are your own court of records, and that receipt has a little serial number at the top of it, and that serial number is your account. And then everybody knows about record. Hit record. If you have to do a live stream, get a live stream running, and make sure there are many witnesses for what's going on. Old Slick has a theoretical service that maybe someday I'll get up and running, but it involves having a drone that comes out your window and records the entire situation on a circuit until the traffic stop is finished, and then the drone comes back into the car, and everything is recorded for your safety and theirs. Notice none of that had anything to do with life threatening. There was no life threatening advice in that. Isn't that amazing that we don't need violence? We just need wit. We just need wit.
Yep. And it's very much a judo tactic, whether it's recording them or transcribing in your receipt log. You're redirecting their energy either way, using it against them if they're going to try to use it against you. Man, this has been an awesome stream, brother. I think it's time to hang it up, and I'm very pleased that we did this, even though I still have the FOMO of missing out on Rhino's original stuff. For people that came late, just want to point out this guy we've been covering, he got cancer of the vocal cords. Okay. So there's some element about what he was doing that was not healthy to his throat chakra. But he also, we don't want to villainize this guy. Nobody's all good or all bad. And this stuff has de-escalated violent conflict and saved lives. So we're just looking at it for what it is, taking what works for living men and women and recognizing how the machine, how the corpse orators use this against living men and women to get them to misidentify, self-incriminate, and comply with things that is not what they really want. I think we really crushed it, man. Love hanging out with you, bro. Feel free to super chat people. There's a lot of thought that went into this. Preparation went into this. But for both of us, you can super chat me through the stream or retroactively. Lots of ways to support me. I've got all kinds of great affiliates. Tippecanoe Herbs, InnerVerse coupon code, Lotus Way, Flower Essence Elixirs. Get yourself a biofield tuning. Those are always amazing. If we weren't already 3 hours deep, I would share some recent testimonials. But lots of ways to support us over here, me and Jennifer and our incoming baby. And you can always super chat Gabe through Cash App, $Slick Dissident. All that's linked in the show notes. We'll see you guys next time, and we love you very much. Bye-bye.
Respect.